Welcome back to Buddhism Seeds, where the ancient teachings of the Buddha become a gentle light, guiding restless nights and weary hearts through the struggles of modern life. Tonight, if you are lying there with something heavy on your heart, if you have ever loved someone so deeply that you could not let go of your image in their mind, then this video is for you. Not because you are weak, not because you are wrong, but because you once loved with all your heart, carried too many expectations, and were hurt too many times by silence. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that just their absence made you feel abandoned? Just one rare phone call, one unanswered message, and you began to question yourself, wondering, maybe I am no longer important. And in that moment, you were not only hurting because of the other person, you were hurting because you lost the image of yourself. You had always known a mother who was always needed, a wife who was always remembered, a friend who was irreplaceable in someone's life. But is that truly love? Or is it a quiet form of attachment we don't even realize we're holding tonight? We will step into a truth that is soft, yet sharp as a blade. Love without clinging is mature love. It's like holding a bird in your hand. If you grip too tightly, the bird suffers. But if you open your palm, it stays because of freedom, not fear. To begin this journey of understanding, let me share the story of Sarah, a mother whose heart ached when her daughter grew distant. But when she learned how to let go without letting go of love, everything changed in unexpected ways. Sarah was a devoted mother. She always believed motherhood was a sacred calling, a role that could not be replaced or paused. For 18 years, she lived in rhythm with her daughter's every breath, from diapers to family meals, through teenage years, sleepless nights during exams, and the tears of first heartbreak. She was always there, not just as a mother, but as a whole safe world for her daughter to return to. For Sarah, this was instinct, obvious, natural. If her daughter needed something, she was there. If her daughter was quiet, she asked. If her daughter was tired, she comforted. For years, she lived for one truth: I am a mother, and mothers cannot be absent. But absence began to appear not from her, but from her child. When her little girl went off to college, Sarah thought it was only a temporary distance, that her daughter would still call, often ask for advice, talk about familiar food, or share stories of friends. But no, messages grew fewer, calls shorter, some days with no reply, some weeks with no words at all. At first, Sarah told herself she must be busy with school, but the silence slowly carved out an emptiness she could not name. She never blamed her daughter, never once felt anger, but her heart quietly hurt. Does she not need me anymore? That question haunted her, especially at night, staring at her daughter's empty room, the desk lamp no longer glowing late into the night. Sarah began texting more, sending words of love, old photos, sometimes just asking, "Are you okay today?" But the harder she tried, the more she felt pushed away. It wasn't her daughter who had changed. It was Sarah who had not yet accepted the shift. She was still clinging to the image of the mother who is always needed, still holding the hope I must be the first one she turns to. That image, sacred for so many years, was now binding her in silent suffering. One evening, on a friend's suggestion, Sarah joined a group meditation session. She expected nothing, but the teacher's words struck her heart. Love your child like holding sand in your hand. Grip tightly and it slips through your fingers. Open your hand, and it remains. Sarah sat still. No explanation was needed. She understood. She saw herself in that clenched hand, not because she wanted to hold her daughter back, but because she wasn't ready to admit her daughter was growing. And growing means moving away. From that day on, Sarah began letting go of the old image. She stopped sending constant texts. She no longer reminded or insisted. She still loved, but in a quieter way. Each morning she sat in meditation and sent a silent blessing. May you always be at peace, whether you think of me or not. And something strange happened. A few weeks later, her daughter messaged First Mom, "I miss your soup." Then came stories about friends, classes, little things with no beginning or end. Not replies out of duty, but genuine connection. Sarah realized when she stopped clinging to the old role, love had space to breathe. And more than that, her own heart grew lighter. She no longer hurt from not being needed. She smiled because her daughter had grown, and she herself had grown in a different way. Love is like a small bird. If you hold it too tightly, you break its wings. If you open your hand, it stays out of safety, and love not out of fear. Or like a balloon. Hold the string gently, and it floats beside you. Grip too tightly, pull it down, squeeze it, and it bursts gone forever. Some people too afraid of losing someone squeeze love too tightly and end up losing everything. Attachment is the fastest way to break what you cherish most. In the Buddha's teaching, attachment, upadana is one of the root causes of suffering, not because the world itself causes pain, but because of the way we grasp it in our minds. We do not suffer because someone leaves. We suffer because we cannot accept that everything changes. We still cling to an old image, an old place, an old role where we were once needed. And when life no longer matches, our heart resists. That resistance, not the situation itself, is the source of suffering. The pain is not in not being needed. It is in not being able to let go of the role of the one always needed. That is the ego resisting impermanence. When you equate love with your self-image, I am important, I am the one loved, sought, needed, then any coldness, distance, or silence feels like an attack on your very being. You don't just feel sad, you feel erased. But the truth is, true love does not require you to be anyone in another's eyes. It only asks that you be present with love without clinging. Remember, love is not holding. Love is opening. You cannot force someone to stay with tears or expectations. But you can create a gentle space where they feel safe to return. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of unconditional love. In daily life, you can practice this with mindfulness. When you feel upset because someone didn't call or text, ask yourself, am I truly loving or am I trying to control? When you feel lonely because you are no longer needed as before, pause and breathe deeply. Then silently remind yourself, I love, but I do not own. I let go, but I do not stop loving. I am an open hand, not a closed fist. You can love deeply and still let the other be free. You can be fully present without binding. And only when you stop needing to be special can you truly love as a free soul and allow the other person to be free too. Such love does not break because it is not built on clinging. It does not need to be fueled by return because it is already whole. When you live with this kind of love, your heart becomes as light as a cloud, and no one, whether they come or go in your life, can take away the peace within you. Michael was an outstanding IT engineer. From complex lines of code to large-scale system solutions, he always delivered with speed and precision that many admired. But behind his calm, professional exterior, his inner world was always tense. He didn't just want to do well. He wanted to be the best. For Michael, earning recognition was not just a goal, it was an obsession. He feared being surpassed. He feared that if he wasn't always the best, then he would be nothing. In every meeting, Michael was the first to speak. He challenged nearly every proposal, even when they weren't wrong, just because they weren't his. When someone else did well, he found the smallest flaw to point out to keep himself as the one who saw further. Slowly, colleagues grew cautious. Some stopped sharing. Team meetings became tense, and Michael, once so passionate, began to feel exhausted. He slept poorly, stayed defensive, and saw the world as competition. It all came to a head when a serious technical failure occurred. A critical system went down, affecting thousands of users. Michael was put in charge of fixing it. He worked for 12 straight hours, buried in code, refusing help, ignoring offers of support, until the system collapsed completely. At that point, nothing could be hidden. Michael was forced to face the truth. He could not save the project alone. With a lowered voice for the first time in years, Michael stood in the meeting room and said, "I was wrong. I need everyone's help." Silence. Then a colleague stepped forward and nodded, "Thank you for being honest." The team began working together. Shifts were shared. Some fixed the bug, others reviewed backups, others communicated with customers. Within 8 hours, the whole system was running again, more stable than before. Strangely, from that moment, Michael began to feel lighter. He no longer needed to be the best. He no longer needed the mask of all-powerful. He no longer had to hide his fear of being replaced. He could just be himself, a skilled man, but not perfect. And that was perfectly fine. Michael slowly changed. In later meetings, he listened more. He started saying things like, "That's a good idea," or "I'm not sure about this part, who can help me?" No one laughed at him. On the contrary, they respected him more for his honesty. He learned an important lesson. Clinging to the image of being the best is also a form of suffering, because when you try to protect that position, you push people away. But when you let it go, you don't become weaker. You become stronger from within. And from then on, relationships began to heal. Not because he was better, but because he was more real. So you see, sometimes you don't have to hold on tightly. You can still keep what you cherish. To love without owning to hold, without squeezing, this is the freedom of an awakened heart. True love is not found in control, but in giving the other person freedom, while we too are freed from roles, from fear, and from the fragile self. Letting go does not mean being indifferent. Non-attachment does not mean a lack of love. On the contrary, it is precisely because we truly love that we do not bind. And it is because we understand deeply that we do not carry what no longer fits the present. In life, how many times have you been haunted by a story that is already past? A hurtful remark, an incomplete relationship, or even an act of helping someone, yet you keep thinking about it, remembering it, and sometimes staying angry about it. But have you ever asked yourself, why does something small control your mind for so long? Is it because we have carried it for too long, to the point we forget we have the right to set it down? The The Buddha once taught, "See life as a river. Let what has passed flow on. Do not try to hold on to a rotten log, for it cannot make you any lighter." One autumn morning, when mist still covered the fields and the last leaves along the road fell softly in the wind, 2 monks, one old, one young, were returning to the monastery after a long pilgrimage. The elder monk's hair was snow white. He walked calmly, as if each step were a prayer. Beside him was the younger monk, newly ordained eyes, still uncertain heart, still filled with things not yet understood. It had poured all night, and the village path was muddy and slick. When they reached a small stream, the water churned cloudy and fast. They stopped at the bank. Suddenly, they saw a young woman standing tucked against the edge of the water. She wore a long white dress stained with mud, her feet awkwardly stuck in the muck. Her eyes were full of worry. Seeing the 2 monks, she hesitantly approached, bowed slightly, and asked in a trembling voice, "Would you, please, help me cross to the other side?" The young monk immediately stepped back. He lowered his head, turned away, pretending not to hear. In his mind, the precepts his teacher had taught rang out. Do not touch women. Do not let the mind be entangled by sensual desire. He furrowed his brow, telling himself he must keep the precepts and keep his mind pure. The young woman's presence in such a state felt like a karmic test, but the elder monk said nothing. He simply smiled, walked up to her, held out his hand, and gently said, "Come, let me carry you across." Without the slightest hesitation or doubt, he bent down, lifted her onto his back, and stepped slowly through the rushing water. His robe was soaked mud clung to its hem, yet his face remained peaceful. Setting her down on the far bank, he nodded as a farewell and turned to continue on without looking back. The young monk followed behind, but his heart was no longer quiet. From the riverbank through the bamboo grove, across fields and up hills, he stayed silent, yet his eyes betrayed inner turmoil. What had happened took only a few minutes, but in his mind it played on repeat like a film reel. With each step came a question. Why did Master do that? How could he touch a woman? How could he go against the precepts? Evening fell. When the temple roof appeared faintly beyond the trees, he could bear it no longer. He stopped and asked loudly, "Master, forgive me, but I don't understand. How could you carry a young woman like that? We are monastics, we keep the precepts." The elder monk stopped. He turned and looked at his disciple, his gaze gentle like the sunset, reflecting on a still lake. "My child, I set her down at the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her in your mind all this way?" The young monk fell silent. In that moment, the tension in his heart dissolved. He realized it was he who had not let go. His teacher, the one who carried the woman, had carried her with the body, but his mind was unentangled. The young monk who never touched her was the one clinging tightly to the image. He bowed his head, his voice choked. "I understand now, Master. Some burdens don't rest on the shoulders, they sit in the mind." The elder monk smiled and turned toward the monastery gate. In the sky, clouds drifted lightly. The evening wind swept by, carrying away an attachment called precepts, returning to the heart, its first taste of ease. Imagine someone holding a balloon by its string. If you grip it tightly, you will make it burst. But if you hold it gently and let the string move with the wind, it still floats with you, neither trapped nor lost. Love is the same. Non-attachment is not letting go of the person. It is holding lightly, without binding, without possession. Only then can connection truly endure, because there is no pressure, no demand, no condition. That Zen story is not just a tale for monastics. It is a mirror shining into the minds of all of us, because it isn't only monks who carry burdens on their backs. Lay people carry them too. But instead of a young woman by a river, we carry an old memory, an unfinished conversation, a hurtful word, or even just a look we never quite understood. There are times you help someone with all your heart and then quietly hope they will remember forever. You love someone sincerely and then ache because they do not love you back in the exact way you want. You do something kind and then feel sad when no one recognizes it. These things seem small, but they become the invisible loads we keep wearing and never set down. We think we have given, but in truth, we are still holding on to something. We hold on to expectations, onto roles, onto the image of being the good person, the one who deserves love, the one who deserves thanks. And because we hold on like that, we suffer not because of others, but because we refuse to step out of the role we keep playing in our own minds. The Buddha taught that suffering does not arise from the event itself, but from the mind's attachment to it. The event has passed, yet we replay it over and over. That image, that feeling, that situation, we cannot stop retelling it in our heads. Like the young monk in the story who never touched anyone, yet carried the heaviest burden. Letting go does not mean dismissing, denying, or being cold. Letting go means setting something down in the right place at the right time. It means you can recall it without being pulled in. It means you still remember, still care, but your heart no longer aches. You look at the person of the past, the story of the past, as you would watch a cloud drift by, seen, but not grasped. A Harvard study on emotional over-identification has affirmed people who cling to negative memories or define themselves through the past have lower psychological resilience and restricted creativity. Meanwhile, those who learn to set things down, knowing all emotions are like water coming and going, have minds that are flexible, soft, and far more able to heal. How many miles have you walked just to carry something you should have set down long ago? Are you living in the present or still a traveler dragging the ghosts of yesterday? Your mind is like hands clenched tight. Sometimes freedom does not come from anything grand, but simply from the act of opening your hands, not letting go out of despair, letting go because you have understood that true love does not require holding on. And perhaps when you stop grasping, that very love will return light as wind, natural as clouds. The elder monk's story is not only a lesson in compassion, it is also a reminder of wisdom. For there are times when love is not in holding on, but in knowing when to let go. And letting go does not only happen when we cast off something outside, it also happens when we stop resisting inside. It is not emotions that make us suffer, but our resistance to them, our denial of them, our battle against them. Some emotions come like a sudden downpour, unexpected cold pouring heavily into the heart. Anger, worry, panic, or deep sadness. No one can avoid such days. But what makes you suffer is not those storms themselves, it is your attempt to run away from them. You tense yourself up to push emotions away. You force yourself to be positive. You tell yourself not to be weak, not to be sad, not to be afraid. But the more you resist, the more exhausted you become. And those emotions, instead of fading, take deeper root. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha once taught, "It is not contact itself that makes people suffer, but the reaction to that contact. Suffering does not come from emotions. It comes from resisting emotions." To understand this more deeply, let us enter the story of a man named David, who once fell into a spiral of crisis until he learned how to let go. David was a graphic designer living in a small, sunlit apartment in a quiet coastal city. He was the type of person who spoke little, lived with discipline, and kept everything in order. Waking early for coffee, working through checklists, eating lunch on time, exercising in the evening, and sleeping before 11. His friends often said he practiced emotional minimalism, handling everything big or small with an almost cold composure. But then something began to go wrong. At first, just a strange sensation in his chest while adjusting a poster for a client. A sudden, abnormal heartbeat. Then a second time. A third. Each time his heart pounded as if it would leap out of his chest. His palms sweated. His fingertips turned cold. Sometimes he had to drop his mouse, close his eyes because he could not breathe. Am I dying? The thought circled through his mind like an unwanted mantra. David tried everything to push away the panic attacks meditation, but meditating with fear, listening to music, but only getting more restless, reading positive books, but unable to focus. He tried deep breathing, self-encouragement, pushing back against the sensations. But the harder he fought, the more exhausted he became. Until one evening, by chance, he joined a simple meditation sharing session with an old Zen teacher. In the quiet hall, David shared about his panic attacks, about the fear that came every time they struck. The teacher listened silently, then asked one gentle question. "When panic comes, what do you do?" David replied, "I try to push it away. I breathe deeply. I listen to music. I focus on positive things. I fight it." The teacher nodded slowly. "And why do you think you must fight it?" David fell silent. The teacher smiled. "Try welcoming that panic as you would a stranger. When it comes, don't wait for it. Let it sit down beside you and breathe together. Don't chase it away. Don't hold it back. Just breathe with it. Like sitting in the rain, knowing you are not made of water." That night, when panic returned, David did something he had never done before. He did not resist. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Hello. I know you're here." And he just sat there, breathing with it. To his surprise, the panic began to fade, not because it disappeared immediately, but because it was no longer fed by resistance. Some fears, worries, and pains are not here for us to fight. They come to be understood and recognized, and only when we dare to look directly at them without shouting, without rushing, simply sitting calmly, do they dissolve. Imagine standing in the rain. If you scream, curse, cover up, or run, you end up soaked in panic and fear. But if you simply stand, breathe steadily, and watch the raindrops fall on your shoulders, you realize you are not the water. Emotions are the same. They are phenomena, not your essence. From David's story, one key lesson emerges. Emotions are not the problem. The reaction to emotions is the root of suffering. When you fight what is present, you only make it stronger. The Buddha once taught, "Just as when a man is struck by an arrow, the fool is struck by a second arrow." The reaction to suffering. The first arrow is the initial panic. It comes and goes. But if you resist fear and worry about worrying, you shoot yourself with the second arrow. That is double suffering. The solution is not pretending to be positive, nor is it suppression or escape. It is to recognize the emotion that is present and allow it to be. This is the spirit of mindfulness, to clearly know what is happening in body and mind, without judgment, without labels, without resistance. A study at Harvard University showed those who regularly practice mindfulness observing emotions without reacting have significantly lower cortisol, the stress hormone. Their brains gradually learn to be calmer, not because life is easier, but because they no longer fight with life. You don't need to win against emotions. You just need not to lose to your own resistance. David learned to release resistance, and through that, he opened the door to healing. But what happens when we not only resist, but also hide our sadness beneath a mask of positivity? Deep within each of us, there are emotions we fear to face. Sadness, loss, disappointment, things that make us feel weak, vulnerable, so we often try to deny or hide them. But the more we run, the more they chase us. The more we resist, the more exhausted we become. The Buddha once taught, "It is not suffering that breaks a person, but resistance to suffering." In Zen, there is a question often asked, who is the one that suffers? And who is the one trying not to suffer? When you reflect on this question long enough, you begin to see a simple truth. Emotions are not the enemy. The one who causes us pain is ourselves. When we try to push them away, deny them, or pretend they don't exist, Lisa's story will help you see this most clearly. A woman who seemed strong, positive, resilient, until she could no longer hold herself up. Lisa was a single mother who had weathered countless storms in life. She raised her son alone for 18 years, worked 2 jobs at once, and still kept her smile and bright eyes. Everyone around her looked at Lisa with admiration. "You're really strong. I always see you so positive and optimistic. You inspire us so much." Lisa became so used to those words that she believed she had to be that way. She had to be strong. She had to be positive. She had to be the one who was always optimistic, even when there was nothing left to be happy about. Everything began to change when her only son left for college in another state. Lisa smiled and waved for a long time at the airport. But when she came home, closed the door, and stood in the empty kitchen, she didn't know what to do next. No more meals to cook. No more music from his room. No more reminders, "Mom, don't stay up too late." Only silence, heavy and lingering like a cold, wet cloth pressed against her chest. Lisa tried to fill the emptiness with positive things. She threw herself into work. She posted pictures on social media, travel photos, pretty meals, radiant smiles. She told herself, "I can't be weak. I'm the one who inspires others." But at night, when the lights were off and no one was watching, Lisa felt like an empty shell. Sometimes, sitting in the living room staring at the empty chair across from her, she felt like she was slowly disappearing. No one saw her. No one knew how she really felt. Her sadness was not loud. It did not scream. It seeped quietly into restless sleep, tasteless meals, unexplained shortness of breath. She began to suffer from insomnia, often waking at 3 a.m., heart racing as if falling into a bottomless pit. "Maybe I just need to be stronger," she thought. But the more she forced herself, the more tired she became. Each time she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman playing the role of being fine, while inside she was breaking into pieces. One day, a friend persuaded her to attend a group meditation session. At first, Lisa sat withdrawn silent. But then, the teacher gently said, "If today you were allowed to be sad without being judged, without hiding, what would you say to your sadness?" Lisa never expected that one question would tighten her chest. Tears welled up and could not be held back. She began to cry, not because she was weak, but because she was finally allowed not to be strong. No one looked at her with pity. No one told her, "Cheer up." And in that moment, for the first time in months, Lisa felt light. From that day, she stopped fighting sadness as an enemy. She learned to sit quietly with it, like sitting beside an old friend. She wrote letters to herself, the younger girl who had been hurt but never cried. Letters to her son, not to hold him back, but to say, "I miss you." Letters to the father who left a grief that had never been expressed since childhood. Every word, every tear was a step back to herself. The sadness did not vanish, but it was no longer a ghost. It became a real part of Lisa, seen, heard, and embraced like a companion on the journey. Sadness is like a rubber band stretched too far. The more you hold it in tension, the more it hurts. But if you gently release the pain, disappears. Or like standing in the rain. You don't want to get wet, so you run hide, deny that it's raining. But the more you resist, the more tired you become. Yet if you simply stand still, breathe and know you are not the water, the rain is no longer frightening. In the Buddha's teaching, what makes us suffer is not emotion itself, but resistance to emotion. Sadness will not kill us. Anger will not kill us. Fear will not bring us down. What breaks us is the endless effort to deny that we are sad, angry, or afraid. Like a river blocked, its waters no longer flow, they stagnate and rot. Emotions are the same. If they are not allowed to flow naturally through the mind, they turn into toxins in the body. Impermanence is the nature of all phenomena, and emotions are no exception. No feeling stays forever. Sadness, however deep, will fade if we do not hold it. Anger, however fierce, will calm if we do not feed it. Each emotion comes like a guest, knocking at the door of the heart. If we are mindful enough to open the door, invite it in, let it sit with a cup of mindful tea, and then see it off when the time comes, there is nothing to fear. The Buddha once taught, just as a householder knows how to open the door for a guest, the mindful one knows how to open the heart for emotions, then let them go when it is time. This is not empty theory. It is a profound art of living, the art of receiving and letting go of emotions without being swept away by them. Modern psychology has reached the same conclusion. Many studies show that when we try to suppress emotions, the sympathetic nervous system responsible for the fight or flight response is activated, constantly leaving the body in chronic stress. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They transform into anxiety disorders, insomnia, headaches, digestive issues, or depression. On the other hand, when we allow ourselves to feel without control, without judgment, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. That is when the body begins to relax, regulate, and recover. Breathing slows down. The heartbeat steadies. Awareness becomes clear. This is the natural mechanism of mindfulness, not controlling emotions, but recognizing, allowing, and then releasing. So whenever you find yourself forcing a smile while your heart is breaking, pause. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and ask quietly, what inside me is longing to be heard? It might be a longing never spoken, a wound from years ago, a desire to be held to cry once without shame. When you allow these things to be present, you are no longer a victim of emotions. You become the one who receives and transforms them. Because sometimes, just one moment of honesty with yourself is enough to free an entire river of new energy, a flow of peace, healing, and awakening. There is a quiet kind of suffering that many people endure, not caused by the outside world, but born from the inner battle within the struggle against what is present. As the Buddha taught, we do not suffer because of emotions, but because of resisting those emotions. Sleep is the most natural thing in life. Yet paradoxically, the more we try to force ourselves to sleep, the more restless we become. Why? Because the very moment you pressure yourself to be still, your mind is no longer still. The more you try to control, the more that control itself strangles you. The question is it possible for the mind to stop struggling so the body can drift naturally like a leaf floating on water? In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha advised us to contemplate the body in the body, contemplate the mind in the mind, meaning see clearly what is happening without trying to fix or eliminate it. That is the foundation of mindfulness awareness, without judgment. Every act of resistance, however subtle, is the doorway to suffering. Let us hear the story of Jennifer, a woman who wrestled with years of insomnia until she discovered a simple but profound truth. The more she tried to sleep, the more sleep eluded her. Only when she learned how to let go and rest in stillness did sleep come like a friend, uninvited, yet welcome. Jennifer was an introspective woman who loved silence and had a deep connection with meditation. She once believed that those who meditate would sleep easily, yet ironically, she became a long-time victim of a silent, relentless enemy, chronic insomnia. At first, the reasons seemed clear: stressful work, endless deadlines that kept her mind from slowing down at night. But then something even more frightening appeared: the fear of insomnia itself. Each evening, while others began to grow drowsy, Jennifer grew uneasy. Lying down felt like stepping into battle, not with the world, but with herself. She tried everything: herbal teas, chamomile, lavender, evening yoga with relaxing poses, light reading, soft music, breath meditation. She turned her bedroom into a spa-like sanctuary: essential oil diffusers, ocean sounds, gentle lighting. But all of it was only an outer shell. Inside, the restless mind was what kept her awake. Each time she closed her eyes, a familiar voice echoed in her head: "Tonight, I must sleep. If not, tomorrow will be terrible." And so a chain of quiet worries began. Her heartbeat quickened. Her body stiffened. Eyes wide open in the dark, tossing and turning in tense silence. She knew she was trapped in a cycle, but the harder she tried, the more awake she became. The more she struggled, the farther sleep drifted. One night, after nearly a week without rest, Jennifer sat up in her room and burst into tears. Not from sadness, but from exhaustion. She felt like she was drifting in a cold ocean without a paddle, without a sail. No one heard. No one saw. Only her and the endless nights. And then something strange happened, not during a deep meditation, not in therapy, but in a night when she simply gave up. That night, Jennifer stopped trying. She did not count her breaths, did not force herself into meditation discipline. She did not command herself to sleep. Instead, she lay down quietly without a goal, just breathing, just feeling the mattress beneath her back, the cool air brushing her skin, the slow ticking of the clock. She whispered to herself, not a command, but an acceptance, I am awake. And that's okay. She did not know when it happened, but she drifted into sleep. No miracle, no sweet music carrying her into dreams, only the complete release. And when she woke the next morning, she did not feel like she had won sleep. She felt as if sleep had been given as a gentle gift. It turned out sleep does not come when we summon it with fear. It comes softly, like a breeze when we open the door with acceptance. That night, Jennifer did not just sleep. She was healed, not from insomnia, but from the illusion that sleep is something to be forced. From then on, her nights were different. Not because she always slept enough, but because she no longer feared being awake. And sometimes that itself was the most effective sedative. Imagine you are holding a rubber band, pulling it tight with both hands. At first you think, just a little more. But seconds turn to minutes. Your arms tire, muscles ache, palms burn, pain creeps in. Eventually, your hands tremble from exhaustion. But strangely, when you let go, nothing explodes, no disaster happens. Only a wave of relief spreads through your body, as if you yourself were released. Many emotions in life are exactly like that. We don't realize we are holding on. We only know we are tired. We try to be strong, calm, in control, thinking that letting go means collapsing, losing control, or disappointing others. But the torment does not come from the emotions, it comes from resisting them. Anger is not as dangerous as suppressing it every day. Sadness does not destroy as much as pretending it doesn't exist. When you relax, it does not mean giving up. It means allowing blocked energy to flow again. Like an underground stream returning to its natural path, your inner strength is reborn when you stop fighting yourself. The tighter you hold, the more you drain. But when you learn to let go at the right time, what returns is not only peace, but true vitality. Being honest with your emotions is not weakness, it is courage. And letting go in the right way, sometimes that is the bravest act a human being can do. Jennifer's story is not just about insomnia. It is a symbol of every area of resistance in the mind, resisting sadness, resisting fear, resisting oneself. The Buddha taught suffering does not come from events, but from the way we react. Insomnia is not the enemy. It is the fear of insomnia that harms you. The same is true in meditation. If you try to force the mind to be still, it becomes more restless. But if you simply sit, breathe, and acknowledge I am uneasy, that unease may dissolve like smoke. Mindfulness does not demand perfection, it only asks for honesty. Research on sleep also shows the harder you try to force sleep, the more the brain activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. But when you accept being awake without resistance, the parasympathetic nervous system activates naturally, bringing the body into rest. A simple practice you can try tonight before sleeping. Don't push yourself. Just place a hand on your chest, gently say, I am tired, and that's okay. Then breathe slowly, simply noticing the rise and fall of your belly. Sleep is not the goal. It is the gift that comes when the mind stops demanding. Jennifer's story shows us clearly suffering does not come from circumstances, but from resistance within. But beyond resistance, there is something even more miraculous, the pure nature already within each of us. A place inside that emotions cannot drown, that circumstances cannot damage. We will now step into the next part to explore this truth. You are not your emotions. You are the one who sees them. Have you ever asked yourself, who am I in the midst of my own rebellious emotions? When anger surges, we become a flame. When sadness floods in, we feel like a dark river. When anxiety weighs heavy, it seems as if body and mind are a suffocating block of stone with no way out. But are you really those emotions? In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, just as space is not stained by the objects passing through it, so too, the awakened mind is not stained by sense phenomena. Emotions are drifting clouds. You are the sky. Emotions are specks of dust. You are the mirror. When we stop identifying with passing emotions, we begin to live as our original nature, clear, still, and unstained. Catherine was a high school teacher, the kind students fondly called the counselor teacher. She didn't just teach literature. She quietly taught them how to be human through knowing eyes, gentle questions, and a heart that was always open. But few knew that behind someone who inspired others was a soul slowly running dry. Each morning, Catherine walked into class smiling, but inside her was a sky full of gray clouds. Her students, 17 and 18-year-olds, lived in turbulent inner worlds, nameless anger, confusion, from first heartbreaks and anxieties hidden behind cool stares. All those emotional waves kept crashing toward her as if she were the only shore they could reach. At first, Catherine thought she was strong enough. She listened to everything. She remembered every story, every time a student wept into their arms on the desk, every midnight text asking for advice. She believed that love must come with full sharing. But gradually, she could no longer tell which feelings belonged to her students and which were truly her own. She started sleeping poorly, dreaming of voices and faces all jumbled together. She burst into tears without knowing why. After class, Catherine went home feeling empty. She wondered, am I trading myself away in order to hold on to love? One day, she signed up for a workshop for teachers titled Staying Yourself in an Emotion-Filled Classroom. An elderly Zen teacher appeared. He didn't say much. After a short period of quiet sitting, he asked one very gentle question. Can you be the sky instead of the cloud? That question, neither lofty nor ornate, pierced the foggiest place in Catherine's heart. She realized that all this time she had tried to become everything: the cloth that wipes tears, the shield against anger, the spring for children thirsty for love. But she had never allowed herself to be the sky, the one that holds on to no cloud, whether rain or sun. From that day, Catherine began to practice. Each morning before the bell rang, she spent 10 minutes in stillness, right in the teacher's room. She let her heart settle like a calm lake. She set an intention. Today I will listen, but I will not retain. When a student lashed out, she didn't react, and she didn't swallow it either. She simply breathed deeply and recognized, this is their anger, not mine. When a student burst into tears after being abandoned by a parent, Catherine sat beside them without platitudes. She simply was there like a quiet tree in a storm. Something strange began to happen. The more she practiced, the less exhausted she felt after each class. She no longer carried her students' sadness home, and unexpectedly, they trusted her more, came to her more. Because amid adults eager to fix, teach, and analyze, Catherine was one of the rare few who simply listened without reacting. She became a quiet sky in a volatile classroom. Students' emotions still came and went, but she was no longer a leaf blown by the wind. She was the gentle sky that allowed everything to appear and disappear within a vast, compassionate space. Catherine was still an English teacher, but now she taught one more thing: the art of mindfulness, not through theory, but through her very presence. Because in a world where everyone is busy doing something to help, the person who truly brings healing is the one who can sit still without losing themselves. Picture a bright mirror placed in a marketplace. All day, it reflects every image: the elderly, children, vehicles, even piles of trash. Yet the mirror is never dirtied by what it reflects. A light wipe and it shines as before. Your mind is the same. Negative emotions are only passing images. They are not you. They do not make you ugly or polluted unless you cling to them and believe, I am this anger. I am that pain. The Buddhist teaching of non-self does not deny our personhood or our emotions. It invites us to look deeply and see that we are not what is fleeting. You are not anger. You are not sadness, anxiety, or even joy. All of these emotions, however strong, come and go, like clouds across the sky. Meanwhile, your deepest essence, the awakened mind, is always present, like the sky itself, untouched when clouds gather. Ironically, we often forget this. When an emotion arises, we immediately say, I am angry, I am despairing, I am weak. We don't just feel the emotion, we become the emotion. That mistaken identification is what makes us suffer. The Buddha taught non-self is the door to liberation, because when we are no longer attached to a fixed, I emotions can no longer bind us. Practicing mindfulness is how we step out of that bondage, not by controlling or suppressing emotions, but by looking directly at them with compassion and awareness. When an emotion arises, pause. Name it. This is sadness. This is anxiety. This is disappointment. And then breathe. Do not react. Do not be swept away. Modern science is increasingly confirming what the Buddha taught over 2,500 years ago. A study at Harvard University found that when a person can recognize an emotion without reacting for 90 seconds, the physiological intensity of that emotion, heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones, drops significantly. In other words, just a minute and a half of awareness begins to free us from the storm. So whenever you feel yourself being carried off, remember this. You don't have to chase emotions away, and you don't have to brace yourself against them. Simply stay within yourself. Slow your breath and return to the deep refuge, the sky of the mind that remains open, no matter how dark the clouds. Then you will see emotions like weather are only passing guests, and you, the one who knows how to open the door, welcome them and gently close it when they leave. Remain. If Catherine is the image of someone learning not to be swept up by others' emotions in an educational setting, the next man is a very different case where pain and death are present every day. Let us step into the story of David, a paramedic who once carried the hospital's psychological wounds home with him, and his journey to learn how to grieve with them without becoming them. David was a paramedic in the emergency response team. For many people, it was a stressful job. But for David, it was living every moment on the boundary between life and death. Every day he rushed through sirens, wailing ambulance lights flashing, and the panic-stricken eyes of patients' families. No one ever knew what the next call would bring: an elderly man collapsing at the dinner table, a young man stabbed in a bar, or a child suddenly stopping breath while playing on a slide. But what drained David was not only the fast pace, it was the emotions, the cries of a mother holding her lifeless child, the terror in a husband's eyes as the doctor declared his wife was gone, the helplessness of watching a pair of eyes slowly dim, with no way to hold on to life. In the beginning, David believed that to be a true paramedic, he had to feel everything deeply fully, each pain of others. For without empathy, what morality remained in the profession? And so he lived that way. He never allowed himself to be cold. He cried with families, bowed his head in grief, stayed awake through nights when he felt he hadn't done enough. But over time, the emotional wounds began to settle. Like silt at the bottom of a river, at first just a little, then slowly building into a wall. David lost sleep. He often dreamed of the faces he had seen at the moment of death. He felt himself sinking into darkness, but thought it was simply the price to pay to be a good person. Until one day, at a mental health training session for frontline workers, a psychologist asked, "Can you share your full presence without dissolving into the emotions of others?" The question cut sharply into David's mind. He froze. All this time, he had never thought of being present without carrying all the pain home. He assumed that if he didn't take it on, he would become heartless. But perhaps it was that very belief that was causing him to lose himself. From then on, David began a new journey. He practiced meditating before each shift. He trained himself to breathe with the pain without letting it cling to his heart. He remembered faces but no longer carried them as scars. Instead of trying to be a savior, he became a witness, fully present with complete compassion, but also full awareness. Once during a severe accident, a young mother lost her 3-year-old son when their car overturned on the highway. She screamed, collapsed by the roadside, clutching her child's backpack in her arms, no one daring to approach. Her grief was a storm sweeping away all reason. But David stepped forward. He didn't speak. He didn't comfort with empty words. He only sat down beside her, just present, just breathing. When she paused briefly to catch her breath, David softly said, "I don't have words to ease this pain, but I will be here until you no longer have to scream alone." And he sat like that, silent, still, just a steady presence. Later, that mother said that in the greatest pain of her life, what kept her from completely collapsing was that silence, the silence of someone who did not try to fix the pain, but simply accepted its presence. David said, "I learned how to be a rock in the flood, steady but not cold. I no longer dissolve into every tragedy, but I also do not turn my back on anyone." And perhaps that is the true meaning of compassion, a love with clear boundaries, but without limits in presence. There is a beautiful image in Zen, a candle before the wind. If you tremble, the candle will go out. But if you keep body and mind steady, the flame can burn even in the storm. Not because the wind stopped blowing, but because you became the strong base for the flame. David was that candle. He was not the wind, neither raging, resisting, nor showing off bravery. He was not a leaf tossed by the storm. He simply stood still, present, burning with a quiet light. That light did not come from endless sacrifice nor from dissolving into others' pain. It came from compassion with healthy boundaries, boundaries that kept him from being extinguished, yet never distant. In Zen, this is called compassion without sorrow, a compassion not stained by suffering. You still feel, but you do not drown. You still listen, but you do not lose yourself in the cries of others. We don't need to merge with pain to be good people. What others sometimes need is not someone to cry with, but someone peaceful enough to hold them steady in the whirlpool. We only need enough mindfulness to be present and enough awareness not to lose ourselves. That is the enduring light, the guiding light, not fading with storms. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha taught, just as a rock is not moved by the wind, the wise are not moved by praise or blame, sorrow or joy. These words are not just a beautiful ideal, but a very practical practice for anyone living in this turbulent world. We cannot stop the wind from blowing, just as we cannot forbid sadness from visiting. But what we can do is not let it carry us away. Sadness is not you. Sadness is only a state of mind, like a cloud drifting across the sky, like a passing shower that will fade. If you can see sadness as rain, then instead of being drenched, you will find the umbrella within yourself, mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness is not about escaping emotions, but about creating a healthy distance between yourself and the storm passing through. You no longer identify with anger, self-pity, or old stories in your mind. You become the mindful observer, the one who sees clearly without clinging. And that very distance is the doorway to freedom. Freedom from old karma, from impulsive reactions, from the whirlwinds of emotion that keep spinning us endlessly. Modern science is now beginning to confirm what the Buddha taught thousands of years ago. A clinical study at Stanford University found that doctors and nurses who practiced just 10 minutes of mindfulness a day had 37% greater emotional resilience than those who did not. They did not become heartless. They still hurt, but they did not break. True steadiness does not lie in gritting your teeth to endure, but in being fully present with compassion and wisdom. The wise do not close their hearts, but they also do not let the storm sweep them away. Like a rock in the open air, firm, but not rigid, present, but unmoved. If Catherine and David taught us how not to be swept up in others' emotions, then the next story is a deeper lesson. What do we do when the storm itself rises within us? She was not a teacher nor a doctor. She was just a single mother who once believed anger was an inseparable part of herself. But then she learned that anger was not me, only a guest knocking at the door. And when she learned to invite that guest in without fear, without avoidance, she found the freedom she thought she had lost for years. Let us step into the story of Maria, a mother, and the lesson of anger. Maria was a single mother. She lived with her little boy in a run-down ground-floor apartment in the suburbs where paint peeled from the walls. The kitchen was always dim, and the noise of traffic never stopped. Each day was a race. Up early to cook, rushing to take her son to school, squeezing onto the subway to get to work, then hurrying home to keep being a mom, a cleaner, the one who carried all the nameless burdens. She loved her son that never changed. But there were times when everything piled up like a bucket filled to the brim. Just one drop, like a spoon clattering to the floor, or a dirty sock left out of place, and the storm inside her spilled over. She yelled. She got angry. She said things that later frightened even herself. And when night fell and the house held only the sound of a child's steady breathing, Maria sat alone, head in her hands, heart aching as if squeezed tight. She didn't understand why. Why did love come with anger? Why couldn't she control herself? She used to think, I must just be hot-tempered. I was born this way. But one night, something changed. That day, her child accidentally spilled water on his homework. Ink smeared, the assignment was ruined. Maria was exhausted after a long day, and as usual, she yelled loudly. So loudly the boy flinched, covered his head, and backed into a corner. But this time, when she saw that look, fear in the eyes of the very child she had cradled every night, something broke open in her heart. Not anger, sadness, pain. After cleaning up and putting her son to bed, Maria sat on the living room floor. It was dark. She didn't turn on the light. She let her tears fall. She didn't want to hurt her child. So why couldn't she stop? A week later, a friend dropped by, noticed Maria's tired eyes, and left her a slim book, Anger, a Gift to be Opened with Mindfulness. Maria didn't read it right away. It sat by her bed for 3 days, and one late sleepless night, she opened it almost without thinking. The first page made her pause. Emotions are guests. They come, stay a while, then go. You are the house, not the guest. For the first time in her life, a thin line of light appeared in what she had always believed. Maybe she wasn't her anger. Maybe anger just visited like a brief rain. And if so, she could choose. Choose not to react. Choose not to invite anger to stay. The next night, when her breath began to quicken and her hands clenched because her son had dropped his milk, Maria did something she'd never done. She placed a hand on her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Hello, anger. I see you." She pictured anger as a guest knocking at the door, not a destroyer, but a messenger. It came to say, "You are tired. You need rest. You are hurt." And strangely, when she stopped to listen, the guest no longer shouted. It stepped back quietly. A week later, something wonderful happened. Her son made another mistake. He broke a bowl in the kitchen. Maria felt the wave rising, but this time she didn't yell. She knelt down, looked at him, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm angry, but I won't yell. I need 5 minutes to breathe, and then we'll clean this up together, okay?" The boy looked at his mom surprised, then nodded. No one cried. No one was hurt. Just a wet floor and mother and child quietly wiping it up together. That night, Maria turned on a soft yellow nightlight, stroked her son's hair, and whispered, "I'm learning how to be a person too. You're helping me so much." And from that night on, something new lived in that small suburban apartment. Mindfulness. Not perfection, but a small candle steady in the wind. Maria realized she was not her anger, just as the sky is not the clouds. The clouds can be dark, heavy, storm-laden, but above them, the sky remains clear, wide, and still. Anger comes like clouds, but if you don't run after it, if you don't mistake yourself for it, you remain the vast sky. In one retreat, I once heard a practitioner compare emotions to guests. If you panic when a stranger arrives, you'll be led around by them. But if you simply observe, invite them to sit, Pour a pot of tea. The guest will know how to leave at the right time. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, just as a bright mirror is not stained by the trash reflected in it, the mind is not defiled by delusive thoughts when it does not cling. At first, this may sound abstract, but it is actually a key to freedom in everyday life. Emotions, anger, sadness, fear are only momentary waves in the ocean of consciousness. What causes our suffering is not that emotions arise, but that we identify with them. We say, I am angry, I'm hot-tempered, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. But the truth is, you are not anger and you are not sadness. You are the one who recognizes that anger is present. Just as a mirror does not become trash because it reflects trash, your mind does not become bad because anger or sorrow briefly appears. But if you believe you are the trash, suffering begins. Maria once believed that she was an irritable mother, that this was an unchangeable nature. But then with one very simple act, pausing, placing a hand on her heart, and looking at the anger, she did what many think is impossible. She did not react. No need to meditate an hour a day. No need to chant thick scriptures. She was simply mindful at the right moment, and that small act cut through a chain of reactive habits repeated for years. This is not only philosophy or religion. Modern science also confirms the remarkable power of recognizing emotions. In a study from the University of Wisconsin, participants only had to name their current emotion, e.g., I feel angry, I'm sad, I'm worried a few times a day for 3 weeks. The results showed significant reductions in negative reactive behaviors and increases in calm and self-control during interactions with others. Just knowing, this is anger, not me, is enough to create a healthy distance between you and the emotion. That distance is freedom. It is mindfulness. It is the safe space within where you can choose not to hurt anyone, including yourself. And the most beautiful part is, Maria didn't just save herself, she saved her son from invisible wounds. A mother who identifies with her anger can leave quiet cracks in a child's heart. But a mother who can pause and say, I'm angry, but I won't yell, is teaching her child through mindfulness itself. When the mother is no longer the anger, the child is no longer the victim. He grows up in a space where mistakes and conflicts exist, but so do love and repair. This is living mindfulness not on an altar, but present in every moment you choose not to be a slave to emotion. It is when you are no longer a leaf swept downriver, but the one who knows you are drifting, and therefore can begin to make your way back to shore. After Catherine, David, and Maria, you may start to see something. None of them were bad people. They all had kind hearts. What made them suffer was identifying with emotions with their students, their patients, their own child. That is also why in the Buddha's teaching, we do not merely treat each emotion separately. We return to the root insight. The original mind is unstained. You don't have to erase emotions to be at peace. You need to know you are not the emotion and let it pass without leaving a mark. Like a bright mirror, whether reflecting trash mud or a lotus, its nature is never sullied. A light wipe, and it shines again. When Maria chose not to yell, not to forcefully suppress her anger, and not to abandon it, either, she unintentionally stepped into something very profound that the Buddha called the middle way, the path between all extremes. The middle way is not compromise, nor a lukewarm in-between. It is a mindful way of living in which you are neither swept away by emotions nor denying them. You see clearly, recognize, and walk in the center of the stream, leaning to neither side. There are times in life when we think that to reach enlightenment, we must give up all comforts and practice severe austerities, like ascetics in the deep forest. And then there are times out of exhaustion when we let go and allow life to carry us away. One side is squeezing ourselves until we can't breathe. The other is letting go into aimlessness. But both in the end do not bring us peace. In such moments, people often ask, so where is the balance point? Is it possible to live without extremes yet still be deep and awakened? The Buddha taught, the wise do not drown in sensual pleasures, nor do they torment the body with pain. They walk the middle way where there is wisdom, compassion, and liberation. That path is not easy to see because our minds are used to rushing into two extremes, either indulging instinct or straining to resist. But in the very moment you breathe, pause, and choose not to react, you are stepping onto a subtle path. The path that more than 2,500 years ago, a prince left his throne to discover the middle way. And to understand the middle way, not just through words, but through a living story. Listen to the following Zen tale, where the light of awakening did not begin with the sound of a lute, but with a warm bowl of milk rice porridge in the midst of starvation, where a monk who seemed to have given up suddenly woke up through a very ordinary moment. People often mention the middle way as a philosophical concept, a principle of balance between two extremes. But for Siddhartha, the prince who left his throne to seek the truth, the middle way did not come from bookish philosophy. It came on a quiet morning by the Naranjara River, when his body was nothing but skin and bone, and his breath as thin as dew on a blade of grass. Before that, Siddhartha had practiced austerities for 6 years. 6 years secluding himself in the forest, fasting until his body was just bones pressing against skin. 6 years meditating in wind and frost, lying on thorns, exposing himself to blazing sun, never once complaining. He believed that to find the path out of suffering, he had to smash every desire, destroy the coarse body. Since suffering arose from craving only by severing all desires, could liberation be reached? Each day he drank a few drops of water, ate a few dry sesame seeds. On some days, he only meditated, swallowing nothing at all. People said he could touch his spine through his belly, for there was no flesh left to shield it. Eyes sunken, hair tangled, skin darkened. He was a gaunt shadow in the mountains, yet his gaze still burned with unwavering conviction. And yet, something in that conviction began to crack, not because he doubted the path, but because his body no longer had the strength to continue. One morning, while walking meditation, Siddhartha suddenly grew dizzy. Darkness closed in. His whole body lost its power. He collapsed by the Naranjara, its waters flowing quietly, unaware that a man was approaching the boundary between life and death. He lay there, sweat soaking the earth, breath dissolving into the wind. He could not sit. He could not meditate. He could not go for alms. He could not go on. And in that very moment, something miraculous happened, not from the sky, not from a flash of divine light, but from a cowherd girl. Her name was Sujata, a simple village girl who lived nearby. That morning, she had cooked a bowl of rice porridge with fresh milk to offer the gods in prayer. Passing by the riverbank, she saw a monk lying there pale and writhing as if no longer aware of the world. Without hesitation, she knelt and offered the bowl of milk porridge to the stranger. In her eyes was purity. In her hands, a very human compassion. Siddhartha looked at her, then at the bowl. He hesitated for a moment. For 6 years, he had not accepted anything of worldly comfort. For 6 years, he had refused every ease, believing that enlightenment would only come by extinguishing everything belonging to the body. But this time he accepted, not because of hunger, not out of softness, but because he suddenly saw clearly, this body is not the enemy of awakening. It is the vehicle. And if the vehicle breaks down, no matter how much the mind wishes to fly, it cannot go far. He ate slowly, spoon by spoon, as if receiving a great lesson from life itself. The porridge did more than warm his stomach. It warmed a faith that had begun to crack the faith that there was another way. Not extreme austerity, not luxurious indulgence, but the way in between, where you keep the body strong enough to support the mind, yet do not let the body drag you into obsession. That is where the middle way lies. After that porridge, Siddhartha did not return to royal life, nor did he go back to the forest to punish his body. He found a great tree, the Bodhi tree by the river, sat down and made a vow. Though flesh and bone decay, if I do not see the way, I will not rise from this place. And there, after 49 days of meditation, the light of awakening appeared not through music, but through the lesson of a bowl of milk porridge, the compassion of a cowherd girl, and the decision of a seeker to release both extremes. It turns out enlightenment is not found in forcing the body, nor in reckless indulgence. It lies in the middle, where the mind does not chase desire, but also does not reject the body. It is in the very moment you look at yourself and see you are too tight and loosen, or too loose and gently draw yourself back to just right. Like a lute string, only at proper tension does the music of wisdom ring. Have you ever crossed a suspension bridge deep in the mountains? There the wind twists the ropes and the planks sway with each step. Every step is a meditation. Lean too far left, or let yourself drift right, and you lose balance and may fall. But if you stand still, afraid to step, you remain stuck in the wobble. Only by walking with a clear mind, not too tense, not too slack, do you cross that bridge. Like a tightrope walker in midair, with no way back. They cannot tense up, because tension kills the flexibility they need. Nor can they slacken, because letting go leads to loss of control. Their body must be soft, yet steady. Their mind still, yet agile. A slight gust does not throw them into panic, yet cannot make them careless. They must be fully present in each moment, each breath, each step, each movement. That is the spirit of the middle way the Buddha taught. The middle way is not a timid compromise, nor is it a lukewarm in-between. It is awakened wisdom about circumstances, the ability to adjust oneself flexibly without losing direction. It is a deep understanding of both extremes, so you are not pulled to either side, yet you do not stand outside of life. It is knowing where you are, what you need, and what will keep you balanced between two edges. In real life, you sometimes seem forced to choose either strain to control everything or let go and be carried by the current. But the truth is, both choices cost you freedom. Those who chase control grow rigid and weary. those who float with emotion, get swept into cycles of suffering. The middle way, the path between, is where you are not dragged and you do not deny anything. You are there, present, seeing clearly, acting from deep balance. Therefore, living the middle way is not withdrawing from life, but walking through life with an awakened mind, a calm body, and clear insight. Like crossing the suspension bridge, each step is balance, and each step is a chance to be fully present with yourself. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said, "There are two extremes that a seeker should not follow. One is indulgence in base sensual pleasure. The other is self-mortification that brings suffering. Avoiding both extremes, the Tathagata has discovered the middle way, which gives rise to vision and wisdom, leading to peace, awakening, and liberation." These words are not only for forest renunciants, they are a compass for all of us living modern lives. In a society full of temptation and stress, some think freedom means running away from the world, abandoning comfort, cutting all ties, practicing harsh austerities in solitude. Others fall into the opposite extreme, drowning in pleasure, letting body and mind be swept into consumption and emotion. The middle way is not a mechanical halfway point between two extremes, but a clear seeing of the nature of each, so you step out of their control. The middle way is the wisdom that suffering doesn't vanish by tightening the body or fleeing the world. It vanishes by recognizing the true cause and practicing methods suited to one's capacity, not too hard, not too loose. Today, neuroscientists confirm a strikingly similar truth when people are under prolonged stress or overexert themselves. The nervous system enters a freeze state, a kind of paralysis that blocks positive input and recovery. But when body and mind return to being both alert and relaxed, the parasympathetic system, the nervous branch for healing and regeneration, activates. That is the foundation for any lasting transformation. For this reason, accepting the bowl of milk rice by the Niranjara was not abandoning the spiritual ideal, not a failure of ascetic resolve as some think. It was a great turning point when a great soul paused, looked deeply, and saw if this body collapses, the path cannot be realized. And that is the wisdom of the awakened, not clinging to methods, not fixating on forms, seeing what needs to be done and doing it with full awareness and compassion. Because the ultimate goal is not to preserve a perfect image, but to carry both body and mind beyond real suffering. The middle way, therefore, is not a path of theory, but a path of living reality. The path between is not only for monks. In family life, many also struggle between two extremes, sacrificing themselves to exhaustion or becoming selfish to emptiness. And a mother learned this precious lesson not from scriptures, but from her child's tears and smiles. Julia was a young mother living in a small suburban apartment where mornings began with a baby's cries and nights ended with the washing machine at midnight. She raised 2 small children while freelancing from home, writing, editing online meetings, sending emails. But Julia was more than a busy mom. She pursued perfection to the point of burnout. Breakfast had to include all 4 food groups. The living room could not have a single toy out of place. The children's schedule was color printed and stuck to the fridge timed to the minute. She always thought, if I push just a little more, everything will be fine. Then one day, after finishing a final article at 11 p.m., Julia walked into the kitchen, looked at the room she had scrubbed spotless, and sank to the floor. Nothing terrible had happened, but her body trembled and tears poured out before she could stop them. Between sobs, she cried out, "Why do I still feel not enough, not good enough, not patient enough, not loving enough, even though I've done everything I can?" The next day, exhausted, Julia took the kids to a nearby park. While they played on the slide, she sat on a bench. By chance, a voice from the local library's loudspeaker drifted over a short talk on Buddhist psychology. The warm voice spoke about the pressures of modern parenting. And then, a sentence tightened her heart. "You don't have to be a perfect mother, just a good enough mother." She froze. A good enough mother. The phrase swirled through her like warm wind in winter. Not perfect, not all-powerful, not superhuman, just enough. From that day, Julia began to loosen. She allowed herself to sleep in 15 minutes. Some days, lunch was just bread with butter and a few slices of fruit. The house was messy sometimes, but her children's laughter echoed through the rooms. When orange juice spilled, she didn't yell. She grabbed a towel, then pulled her child into a hug. When a deadline slipped a bit, she learned to apologize to clients instead of gritting her teeth alone. The miracle was, things didn't get worse, they got better. Her children were happier. Her husband felt lighter. And for the first time in years, Julia felt she could truly breathe. She didn't need to be the best mother. Just a mother who knew when to love herself, when to stop and rest, and who understood good enough is sometimes the most beautiful thing. Picture a scale. If you pour water into one side until it's full sooner or later, it tilts. Not because the water is bad or the scale weak, but because imbalance went unnoticed. But if you pour a little at a time, pausing to listen, which side is too heavy? Which side is lacking? The scale can stand steady, even between two fragile bowls of water. Balance doesn't come from one side being stronger, but from constant listening. Bit by bit, small adjustments, moment by moment awareness. That balance is quiet, hard to notice, yet more enduring than any heavy-handed force. Parenting is the same. Many think loving a child means sacrificing everything. They pour all time, energy, dreams, even sleep into the child's side. Slowly, the scale tilts. Then they burn out, lose direction, and wonder why they feel lonely inside the very family they built. Love is not pouring everything out. It is pouring evenly. Being a parent does not mean forgetting yourself. On the contrary, only when you are filled enough health, enough spirit, enough lightness in the heart, does the love you give not turn into pressure or control. Self-care is not selfish. It is part of a sacred balance, a gift you give yourself and those you love, because a scale can only stand steady when both sides are listened to. In the Buddha's teaching, compassion is not sacrificing everything, erasing yourself so others can be happy. Compassion is wisdom in love. It is the ability to see suffering, both others and your own, and to reduce it not by shouldering everything, but through understanding and balance. A good enough mother is not one who does everything, but one who knows when to stop and care for her inner life. She knows that if she is tired, her voice will turn sharp. If she is overloaded, love easily becomes blame. And if she forgets herself too long, even kindness born of good intent turns into depletion. Compassion cannot endure without compassion for oneself. Donald Winnicott. The renowned psychologist once said, "A child does not need a perfect mother, only a good enough mother." Because it is within imperfection that a child learns the greatest lesson, that people can stumble and still be lovable, make mistakes, and still deserve to be held. That true love is not found in perfection, but in the ability to return, apologize, forgive, and continue loving with the cracks still there. This is the spirit of the Buddha's teaching, not to run from suffering, but to walk through it gently. And the good enough mother is the one who walks just so day by day, step by step, on the path of compassionate wisdom. Meditating more is not always meditating rightly. Some people sit for 14 hours a day, yet the moment they leave the cushion, a single noise makes them irritable. And that happened to a very diligent meditator until he met his teacher. At the foot of a mountain range, thick with forest, there was a small monastery hidden in nature. No phone rings, no traffic noise, only the soft songs of wild birds and the rustle of leaves as companions. People came there to learn how to listen, not to outer voices, but to the deep sound within themselves. One early winter morning, a young meditator came to that monastery, eyes shining and determination unshakable. He didn't bring much, just a small cloth bag and a big aspiration enlightenment. Bowing deeply before the elderly abbot, he said, "Master, I haven't come here to rest. I've come to overcome the ego and attain the way in this very life. Please allow me the strictest training." The teacher looked at him for a long time, then simply nodded. From then on, an ascetic journey began. Each day, while the other monks followed a 4-session schedule, that meditator chose to sit for 14 hours straight. He skipped breakfast and ate only a simple vegetarian meal in the late afternoon. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't join in work duty, and didn't stroll through the forest like the others did in the cool evenings. He refused anything that wasn't meditation. At first, everyone admired his diligence, but then something began to change. One morning, when a young novice accidentally dropped a water jug near the meditation hall, he frowned and exhaled sharply. Another day, when a monk asked after his health, he answered curtly, unable to hide his irritation. He began to feel annoyed by the sound of Belle's footsteps, even the wind slipping through the doorframe. He became quick-tempered, and strangely, the more he meditated, the more hot-headed and rigid his mind felt. He told himself, "I must not be enough yet. I have to push harder, sit longer, observe absolute silence, cut off all worldly attachments." But harshness didn't lighten him. On the contrary, his mind grew heavier and more judgmental. He looked at his fellow practitioners as lazy. He saw their laughter as a lack of seriousness, their rest as a waste of practice time. One late afternoon, the abbot gently called him to the main hall. There was no scolding, no criticism, only the elder's deep, gentle eyes and one question. "You meditate 14 hours a day, that's impressive. But I only want to ask, when you get angry at others in that moment, is your mind awake?" Silence fell over the room. The young meditator lowered his head. He didn't know how to answer. The teacher smiled, took an old instrument from the corner, and plucked one string. It was too tight and snapped at once. He plucked another. It was too loose and made no sound. Then he said, "A practitioner's mind is like a lute string, too tight and it breaks, too loose and it's mute. Practice is not to strain yourself, nor to drift aimlessly, the middle way. That is the path the Tathagata pointed out. Neither self-mortification nor indulgence, living in the middle deep even as it is balanced. Those simple words struck like a mallet on the bell of the heart. The young meditator sat in stillness for a long time. For the first time in months, he didn't sit to attain the way, but to see that he had gone astray. From that day, he changed. He no longer rose at 3 a.m. to force himself to sit until night. He ate proper meals, walked beneath the bamboo grove, smiled at the novice each morning, and sometimes simply sat quietly, watching the sunset descend over the mountains. The number of sitting hours decreased, but each moment of daily life became a living practice, washing a bowl, chewing a mouthful of rice, listening to distant birdsong. And something strange happened. His face grew brighter, lighter. The judging gaze disappeared, as did the stance of trying to become someone. What remained was a human being returned to himself, complete and at peace. And perhaps that is enlightenment, not a dazzling destination after days of self-denial, but the moment you stop, listen to the string within, and learn to tune it just enough to let the sound of awareness ring. Imagine a person walking across a suspension bridge strung between two cliffs. Wind blows from both sides, making the plank sway, as if to toss everything into the abyss. Yet the person keeps moving forward, neither leaning too far left nor tilting too far right. They keep balance not only with the body, but with awareness in each step. That is a vivid, living image of the middle way, the path the Buddha found after years of extremes in both indulgence and asceticism. He once lived in royal luxury. Then he abandoned everything, entered the forest, and practiced austerities until only skin and bones remained. But in the end, neither extreme led to liberation. Precisely by letting go of both, the Buddha discovered the middle way, the path between where the mind stays steady amid all fluctuations and wisdom arises unclouded by extremes of emotion or will. The middle way is not a bland compromise or a safe choice. It is not standing still to avoid the storm. It is the art of living awake in the storm, not pulled to one side, neither clinging to desire nor swept away by self-punishing austerity. It is the subtlety of knowing when to step back and when to step forward, when to be silent and when to speak with loving kindness and wisdom. You can see the spirit of the middle way in the simplest things of life. A person who eats in moderation, not restricting so much they lack nourishment, nor indulging in unhealthy habits, is practicing the middle way. A person who sets boundaries on work hours, rests and cares for body and mind, like two arms kept evenly strong, is walking that bridge between excess and deficiency. For parents, the middle way doesn't mean being perfect. It means being awake enough not to over-control, yet not so lax that children lose direction. Love that is measured protective, without binding, bounded without coldness, is compassion in the spirit of the middle way. For practitioners, the middle way is the measure for knowing whether we lean too much toward theory without practice, or become so absorbed in practice that we neglect right view. Sometimes simply sitting down, taking a deep breath and asking, "Am I going too fast or too slow?" shows where we stand on the path. Even modern science has begun to speak a similar language. A study from the University of California found that people who balance work and rest, avoiding extremes on either side, tend to have stronger immune systems recover emotionally more quickly and notably feel life is more meaningful. That is no accident. Balance itself is a profound form of living wisdom. When you move too fast, you lose breath and direction. When you move too slow, you may miss precious opportunities in the present. But when you walk at a just right pace, rhythmic aware, listening to your own heartbeat, you not only go the right way, you also learn to enjoy each step of the journey. When you understand that the middle way is not superficial compromise, but a courageous choice in a world that pushes everything to extremes, you are ready to step deeper into the heart of the Buddha's teaching. For the middle way does more than help you live peacefully. It opens the door to understanding the deepest nature of suffering and the path beyond it. Now, as we pause at the threshold of that understanding, let us step into the next part, where the Buddha lays out the eightfold path, the path that helps a practitioner not only keep balance, but overcome suffering in a true and lasting way. Have you ever wondered why some people after a crisis become stronger and deeper, while others in the very same situation seem shattered forever? The same loss one person gets through it, another collapses. The same suffering, one person opens their heart, another closes off. So where does the difference lie? The Buddha called it the two arrows. The first arrow is what no one can avoid: illness, accidents, betrayal, separation, death. This is life, the law of arising and passing that no one can control. But the second arrow, the one that really makes us suffer for a long time, is the one we shoot into ourselves, the resentment of why me, the torment of if only that day, the negative outlook that keeps swallowing itself in the darkness of imagination and clinging. The Buddha spoke plainly. The wise are struck by one arrow, the foolish by two. This line isn't for reciting to sound good. It's for living truthfully. The wise are not people who don't feel pain. They are people who know pain is a natural part of being human. But suffering, enduring chronic suffering, is the unconscious choice of a mind not yet awake. The wise look straight at pain without hiding it, but they also don't bind themselves to it. They know if you can't change the situation, you can at least change how your mind receives it. To do that, you need a map, a path. The Buddha laid out that path in the Four Noble Truths. Dukkha, recognize suffering. Samudaya, understand its roots. Nirodha, see the possibility of its cessation. And Magga, the concrete path of practice that leads to liberation. This is not a belief system to worship, but a living map. It's for those who are worn out by suffering and humble enough to walk step by step on the path of awakening. Every time you don't react in your old habitual way, you refuse to shoot another arrow into yourself. Each such moment, you live more deeply in the freedom the Buddha pointed to more than 2,000 years ago. Sarah was a devoted mother, the kind who would tense up at the faintest cough from her daughter. From the time her child was small, Sarah watched every step, every stumble, every feverish, restless sleep. For her motherhood wasn't just a role, it was an instinct, strong, loving, always ready to protect. But when her daughter reached adolescence, something changed. She no longer told her mom everything about her day. no longer rushed in for a hug after school. "I'm fine" began replacing the endless childhood stories. Sarah felt something slipping through her fingers, as if the thread connecting them was fading into the mist of growing up. One evening, her daughter asked to go to a best friend's birthday party. Sarah smiled and said yes, but the moment the door closed, a wave of anxiety hit like a sudden storm. In her mind, every worst-case scenario appeared: car crashes, alcohol, drugs, bad actors, a midnight phone call. Unable to bear it, Sarah started calling. No answer. She checked social media, refreshed Instagram, texted other parents, paced the living room like someone trapped in a maze of imagination. Each imagined scene was an invisible knife slicing into the trembling heart of a mother who loved her child to the bone. That was the second arrow. The first arrow, a mother's natural worry, was unavoidable. But the second arrow, control, catastrophic imagining, self-inflicted sleeplessness, was one Sarah kept shooting into herself over and over. One day, Sarah joined a meditation class at a nearby center. She didn't expect much, just some relief from exhaustion. But in the quiet room, an elderly meditation teacher said something that struck her like lightning. Love is not control. Love does not require someone to live according to your fear. Her throat tightened. The line flipped her inner world upside down. She had never clearly distinguished love from fear. She called it love, but much of it was fear. Fear her daughter would go astray, get hurt, or that Sarah herself would no longer be the anchor. That night, instead of calling again, Sarah sat on the floor, placed a hand on her chest, and closed her eyes. She breathed in, breathed out, and simply recognized, this is worry, but I don't have to let it run me. It was her first time meditating not to escape, but to really look deeply. After 20 minutes, she opened her eyes, picked up her phone, and sent her daughter a short message. "I'm at home, open-hearted and trusting. Please stay safe." Not a check-in, not an intervention. A message of love freed from the shape of fear. Waves are real. You cannot go to the ocean and wish it had no waves. Nor can you step into life and expect only calm seas. Some days, the water is mirror smooth. Other days, wind rises and waves crash without warning. But a swimmer doesn't demand the ocean change. They learn to breathe with the waves. They learn to float instead of sink. Suffering is the same. It's a natural part of life. You can't stamp out every hurt, loss, separation, or injustice, but you can learn not to be swept under. You can learn to see emotions clearly without being carried away by them. You may not control every circumstance, but you can always control your response. What matters is not making the waves disappear, but understanding you are not a rudderless boat. You can take the helm with a steady mind, an even breath, and a heart that knows the waves will pass and I will still be here. Suffering is inseparable from life. Everyone faces it. But what exhausts us isn't the initial pain. It's the resistance to pain. When you refuse to let pain exist, when you keep reacting, struggling, trying to control or deny what's happening, that's when the second arrow lodges deep in your heart. It is the reaction against reality that is the root of prolonged suffering. A wave of pain will pass, but if you thrash in it, you don't just get wet. You can tire out and sink. Acceptance is not surrender. It is stopping the fight with what cannot be changed. It is the wisdom to know when to pause, breathe, observe, and then act. Research from Stanford University supports this. When people allow themselves to feel negative emotions instead of suppressing or denying them, stress hormone cortisol levels drop significantly. They recover faster after adversity and can face reality more clearly. In other words, letting go doesn't make you weak. It saves your energy to stand up at the right time. If Sarah is a vivid example of someone brave enough to pull out the arrow she shot herself, the next story shows another angle, the power of changing the question. Sometimes just changing the question can change your life. Not why is this happening to me, but what can I do now to move forward? The answer isn't in resentment, it's in awareness. Elena had been a woman full of dreams and plans. When pregnant with her first child, she envisioned a bright future, family picnics, children's laughter, tiny feet running through the park. But those images faded a few years after her son was born. He didn't speak at the usual age. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't respond to his name. After many tests, doctors diagnosed a neurodevelopmental disorder, an autism spectrum condition. From that day, Elena entered a journey she had never prepared for. She became obsessed with questions that cut into her heart like cold knives. Why my child? Why isn't my child like the others? Why do I have to endure this? She tried everything to fix him. Pediatricians to neurologists, speech therapists to folk healers. Elena went asked, waited for a miracle. The more she searched and hoped, the more stuck she became. Each scientific answer opened another question in her heart. And then she sighed again. No one understands me. At a healing meditation retreat she joined as a last resort to keep from breaking down, Elena was invited to share with an elderly teacher. She sobbed for nearly half an hour. All the resentment, shame, inferiority, and anger poured out like a burst dam. She spoke of feeling lesser when friends posted their kids' achievements of sleepless nights crying because her child wouldn't say "Mom" of the pain of avoiding her own son because she couldn't bear his vacant gaze. The teacher stayed silent throughout. No judgment, no interruptions. Only when Elena finished did he gently ask that question. Why is my child like this? How many years have you been asking it? Almost every day, she whispered. And has it helped you? She froze. No one had ever asked her that. People comforted, analyzed, explained. No one had asked plainly whether that question actually helped. The teacher continued slowly. If it hasn't helped, try another question. Simple. What can you do now from your heart? Not what can you do to cure him? Not what can you do to make him like others, but what can you do from the heart, from presence, from love, without conditions, without demands. That night, Elena didn't cry like before. She sat with her child, not trying to make him speak, not forcing eye contact, not thinking about the future. She simply showed up. For the first time, she realized love doesn't always have to fix anything. Sometimes it only needs to be present to understand. From then on, Elena stopped focusing on fixing him and learned to interact as a companion. She studied nonverbal communication techniques, listened to his body language, learned to smile when he repeated a behavior for the 10th time. She didn't hope he would become like anyone else. She hoped he would be himself within arms that no longer blamed. No one promised her child would be normal. But when Elena stopped condemning fate, something else sprouted. Life began to return in her heart. Each breath felt lighter. Each day felt complete. Each moment with her child became a lesson in unconditional love. Some questions will never be answered, but sometimes letting go of why is the beginning of a new life one that asks, how can I love now? Imagine you've fallen into a deep pit. The ground gives way. The light above shrinks to a small circle. Dizzy and stunned, instead of grabbing the walls to climb, you keep asking, why me? Why did I fall in? Each repetition of that question digs you deeper with despair. Blame helplessness eating away at you. You don't move forward, you sink. To live, we sometimes must accept a hard truth. Some questions don't have immediate answers or any at all. Wisdom lies not in forcing an explanation, but in setting the question aside for now and focusing on the next step from where you are. The Buddha, the teacher of awakening, didn't try to explain everything about the universe, the soul, or the afterlife. He didn't teach people to trace every cause to the end. Instead, he asked a simple, profound question. This is suffering. What will we do with it? From that question, the Four Noble Truths were taught as a map out of suffering. They don't begin by excavating the past, but by recognizing the present and acting in the present. 4 steps. See suffering. See the cause. See the possibility of ending it. Practice the path that leads to its end. Each step is concrete, doable, and action-oriented. Modern behavioral science confirms this. When people shift from stuck questions like, why am I like this, or how did it come to this, to action-oriented ones like, what do I need to do now? The brain activates areas for problem-solving and focus, and reduces activity in regions tied to ruminative thinking, the root of anxiety and depression. So if you're in some hole in life, a crisis, a loss, an unhealed pain, take a deep breath and ask yourself, from here, what can I do? So there is less suffering for me and for others. That isn't ignoring the pain. It's the first step to not drowning in it. From Elena, we see when the question changes, the inner world changes. When the mind accepts impermanence as natural law, something else begins creativity instead of resistance. The next story shows how, when an entrepreneur let go of the need to control life, he began to see doors that had never opened before. We often fear change because it makes us feel out of control. The paradox is, resisting change makes us suffer. Accepting impermanence makes the mind clearer, softer, and from that creativity arises. Marcus owned a long-standing chain of bookstores spread across the city. For nearly 20 years, he was a symbol of a book-loving generation, a keeper of traditional reading culture. His stores didn't just sell books. They were places where people returned to quiet, to the scent of paper, to wooden shelves, telling stories in their own way. He used to say with unabashed pride, "Printed books are the soul of knowledge. Everything else is a pale copy." For years, that philosophy brought success, steady revenue. His book fairs drew thousands. Author signings, readings, and cultural talks made him a familiar name in intellectual circles. Then, the market shifted. Young people stopped visiting bookstores like before. They listened to audiobooks while driving, watched short videos analyzing philosophy, read blogs that reduced 300-page novels to 5 minutes. Thick paper tomes, once treasures to Marcus, gathered dust on the shelves. He refused to believe it. Instead of adapting, he tried to preserve the past. He opened more branches, invested heavily in printing, invited famous authors for events, hung banners, save print books. Revenue kept plunging. Staff quit. Partners walked away. Marcus lost sleep. He grew irritable, scolding often. He no longer stepped into his stores each morning with the old loving spirit. He withdrew, clinging to a cracking belief. This is the world's fault, not mine. One late afternoon, while sorting unsold stock, Marcus ran into an old customer, a man who used to buy Buddhist books there. They exchanged pleasantries, and then the elder looked him in the eye and said slowly, "Marcus, if a boat is sinking and you keep loading more books on the books, won't save you. They'll pull you under faster. Sometimes you have to throw off a few crates so you can swim to shore." Marcus froze. The words were light as breath, but rang like a bell cutting through the clouds in his head. He went home and sat alone in a room full of books. For the first time in years, he didn't analyze the market or plot how to fight the trend. He just sat quietly and admitted his suffering wasn't only about money. It was about not letting go of his ego. The me who was the hero of reading culture. The me that refused to change even though the world had. From that moment, Marcus stopped waging a futile war against the times. He began listening to the young again. They didn't hate books. They needed a different way in. So instead of opening more stores, Marcus pivoted. He built an audio platform, launched a mindfulness podcast, and created a series called Reading with the Heart, Not Just the Eyes. From physical space, he moved into inner space. From clinging, he began allowing. And strangely, when he stopped fighting, impermanence, creativity returned like cool water. Marcus was no longer the keeper of an old warehouse of books. He became a guide for a new generation to meet knowledge in their own way. Marcus's story recalls a profound example the Buddha once used. The waves of the sea are real, but don't scream when the waves come. Learn to swim. In life, waves change. Loss, upheaval are real. The first arrow of suffering is what everyone faces. But what makes us collapse isn't necessarily that pain, it's our attitude toward it. When you rage, resist, deny, and lament your fate, you shoot the second arrow into yourself, the arrow of ignorance, the habit of a mind that refuses to let go. Marcus didn't suffer because the world changed. He suffered because he wouldn't accept that it had. He clung to an old image of himself, and the more he fought reality, the more he sank. Awakening isn't controlling the waves. It's knowing how to breathe beneath them. You can't command the wind to stop, but you can learn to set your sail. You can't halt the river of life, but you can drop what's pulling you under. Marcus transformed when he shifted from resisting to adapting, from clinging to an old self to opening to a new future. In that moment, suffering didn't vanish, but it became a lesson, not a sentence. Like Marcus, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to swim by changing how you see, breathe, and move. From Marcus's story, we see one of the first truths the Buddha taught in Deer Park, the first discourse after his awakening, the Four Noble Truths. The first truth, dukkha, suffering is everywhere. No one escapes it. We suffer from loss, from frustration, from change, from aging, illness, death, different faces of the same truth. The second truth, samudaya. Origin, the cause of suffering is craving, clinging, resisting impermanence, trying to hold on to what no longer fits. The third truth, nirodha, cessation, suffering can end when we let go of that clinging. The fourth truth, magga path. The way to end suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, a mindful way of living with right view, right intention, right effort. Marcus's true pain wasn't losing revenue. Money and market share were arrows of the first kind. The second arrow pierced deeper the sense of losing himself when the image, "I am the guardian of reading culture," wavered. He wasn't only grieving a career, but an identity built on success. That is what exhausted him. Yet in the moment he dropped the role and accepted impermanence, creativity began to flow again. Many of us live like this. We cling to a role, the ideal mother. So when our child fails, we feel we've failed, the successful one. So when we lose a position, life feels meaningless, the strong one. So when we're weak, we feel ashamed and hide our tears. But the truth is, you are not those roles. They're garments we wear to pass through stages of life. Each garment has its time to be changed. A Harvard study found that people who shift roles, flexibly adapting as life roles change, have 42% higher psychological resilience than those who cling to old images. They don't panic when careers pivot, don't spiral when relationships end, don't collapse when a role is lost. They know life is a flow, and wisdom is not in clinging, but in letting go at the right time. Marcus walked the path of cessation when he released the old role and moved into a new medium. In doing so, he not only saved himself, but was reborn into a different kind of contribution, deeper and better suited to the times. So can you. If you find yourself straining to keep a role that's now too tight, ask, "This is suffering. What will I do with it?" That is the first question of freedom. The Four Noble Truths are not only to help us understand suffering, but to realize there is a way through it without suppressing ourselves or forcing a different life. It is the path of non-coercive action, acting not driven by craving, aversion, or delusion, doing without forcing, living without strain, guiding without meddling, letting go without indifference. In the next part, we'll enter the path where unforced action brings great transformation, where compassion doesn't require burden, and wisdom needs no loud words. This is the journey of Wu-Wei, action without forcing, where truth lies not in the deed itself, but in the quality of mind from which the deed arises. Have you ever noticed that the more you force something to happen, the more it slips away? Like someone with insomnia who tosses and turns because they're trying to make sleep come. Like a leader whose tighter control only breeds more resistance. Or someone who loves too intensely and makes the other person feel smothered. In Buddhism, this isn't new. The Buddha taught acting with mindfulness is action not driven by craving or anger. When action arises from a mind of urgency, anxiety, and clinging, even if you succeed, you end up exhausted. But if you act like water, soft, persistent, not arguing with stone yet still wearing it down, results come on their own. Not because you force them, but because you create the conditions. Maria is the HR director of a corporation with over 3,000 employees. To many, she embodied performance, decisive, cool, and intolerant of mistakes. She arrived earlier than everyone left last and watched every team's KPIs like a sentry. To employees, Maria's name often meant stress. Whenever someone missed a target, she called them straight into a meeting, didn't let them sit long, and fired off questions. Why are we down 12%? Who's responsible? What did you do last week? The air felt thick, like a storm about to break. When departments clashed, Maria didn't need every detail. She chose the side with the sharper argument, signed the transfer orders, closed the file. "No one has time to listen to employees' feelings," she once said in an executive meeting. Strangely, the tighter she squeezed, the more team performance fell. Time off requests climbed, team leads churned, and attrition rose for 3 consecutive quarters. Maria began losing sleep and snapping at herself. One day, she stood before the restroom mirror and asked, "Where did I go wrong?" By chance, she received an invitation to a 3-day mindfulness retreat at a quiet center by the woods. At first, she planned to decline. She wasn't the type to sit and breathe to fix work. But something in her fatigue made her say yes. She needed a pause. On the second evening, an elderly meditation teacher began to speak. His voice was low and unhurried, with no hint of coercion. He described leadership as a garden. If you only focus on pulling weeds and trimming leaves, you forget to water and fertilize. He ended with a simple line that rang through Maria like a bell. A good leader isn't the one who does everyone's work, but the one who creates the space for others to grow. Maria didn't take notes. She just sat quietly. But inside, something shifted. Back at work, she started to change. She made no announcements and sent no new leadership-style emails. In meetings, she simply stayed silent more. Instead of saying, "I think we should do this," she asked, "What do you think about this?" When someone made a mistake, she didn't explode. She gently asked, "What led you to that choice?" and waited. At first, teams were puzzled. Some whispered, "Is the boss okay?" But they realized Maria wasn't cracking down like before. She truly listened. She let them finish. She didn't interrupt. A new quiet spread through the conference room. And the remarkable thing, performance rose. More importantly, people changed. They weren't afraid of being wrong. They admitted struggles. They proposed solutions. An employee who had planned to quit stayed and became a team lead a month later. Maria looked at herself. She used to be a flame burning mistakes, scorching feelings. Now, she had become water calm, flexible cooling, and nourishing minds. No one forced her to change. She changed when she saw pressure doesn't always make diamonds. Sometimes pressure just breaks what was already fragile. There's a simple but profound image: someone holding a balloon. Grip too tightly and it pops. Let go and it floats away, but hold it lightly enough to support it, not enough to crush it, and the balloon hovers beautiful, rising in the breeze. After her shift from a pressure-first leader to a listener, Maria learned just that. She learned the art of holding without squeezing. Before, she controlled with fear, thinking it would get results. In truth, it only made people shut down. When she paused, breathed, observed, and asked, instead of ordering, life opened up. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught one who is mindful pauses before speaking and observes before acting. That teaching isn't only for monastics. It applies to leadership, parenting, any human interaction. Quick reactions aren't always smart. They're often the product of unconscious habit and a bruised ego. Right action isn't fast action. It's present action, where you're not driven by anger, fear, or vanity. You can start small. When your child doesn't do homework, instead of shouting, "Why won't you study?" take a deep breath and say, "Where do you feel stuck?" When a coworker errs, instead of snapping, "What kind of work is this?" ask, "What led you in this direction?" The moment you pause rather than react, you cut the chain of habit. That is wu-wei in the Buddhist sense, not doing nothing, but not doing anything under the compulsion of ego. You still act, but the action arises from awareness, not fear or control. Science has caught up with this. Neuroscience shows that in environments of listening and non-threat employees' cortisol, the stress hormone drops significantly. When cortisol drops, the brain returns to creativity analysis and deep connection, the ingredients for performance and breakthroughs. A Stanford study also found that leaders who use asking rather than telling have 38% greater long-term impact, especially in innovative settings. Maria didn't need to give up leadership. She needed to shift from commander to spacemaker. In that space, her team grew not out of fear, but because they were trusted. Likewise, for any of us parent, boss, or friend, we can become nourisher instead of controller. Each time you don't squeeze, you give others and yourself a chance to rise higher. Jennifer is a sought-after interior designer, known for her refined style and knack for turning any space into a place people love to live. Few knew that behind her success was a woman exhausted by sleeplessness. Insomnia wasn't new. She had lived with the flood for nearly 2 years. It started with a few deadline nights. Then insomnia became a frightening habit. She tried everything: melatonin, herbal teas, binaural beats, turning off her phone early, even changing sheets and night lights. But the more she chased sleep, the wider her eyes stayed. "I don't get it," she once sobbed to a friend. "My body is wrecked, but my mind keeps racing, morning after morning." Jennifer walked into the office with red eyes and a foggy head, as if living inside a thin veil, everything tiring, nothing clear. One day, like a light at the end of the tunnel, she heard about a 3-day meditation retreat outside the city. With little hope and nothing to lose, Jennifer signed up. On the first morning, as people shared why they were there, Jennifer spoke simply, "I have chronic insomnia. I just want one night of real sleep." The elderly teacher looked at her, gentle and penetrating. He asked, "Why do you suffer because of sleeplessness?" Jennifer answered as if it were obvious. "Because I need sleep to work tomorrow. If I don't sleep, I'm tired, worried, and afraid it'll hurt my projects." The teacher nodded, then asked again, "Do you see that you're not only not sleeping, you're forcing yourself to sleep?" Jennifer paused. She had never considered that. He smiled and offered a curious example. "Have you ever tried to make a bird land on your hand? No. But I guess it's hard. If you hold out your hand with too much wanting, it trembles. The bird won't come. If your hand is steady, quiet, welcoming, it may land unexpectedly. Sleep is like that. The more you force, the farther it gets. The more you crave it, the more awake you become." Jennifer lowered her head silently. He continued, "Instead of trying to sleep, create the conditions for sleep to arise. Be like water, don't try to push the current. Remove the heavy stones in the mind, and the water flows on its own." That night, for the first time in 2 years, Jennifer didn't watch the clock or whisper, "I must sleep." She simply lay there, no forcing. She noticed the wind at the window, the blanket on her skin, her breath moving in and out. Simple, no expectations. Sleep came light as a yellow leaf settling on a still pond. She woke to sunlight through the blinds, 6 o'clock. She had slept straight through. No alarm, no tossing, no dreams. From then on, Jennifer stopped chasing sleep. She learned to loosen her grip and let the bird land on its own. Someone once said the harder you try to recall a name, the more it hides like a shadow. Yet when you stop trying washing dishes, walking, doing something else, the name pops up clear as if whispered in your ear. The mind works like that. The tighter you grasp, the more it slips. The more you relax, the clearer it becomes. Jennifer thought she had insomnia, but she was really trapped in the obsession to sleep. What drained her wasn't only lack of sleep, it was the invisible chase between craving and reality. The more she yearned for a quiet night, the more she was bound to a sense of failure when sleep didn't come. That clinging was the root of her suffering. Letting go, that's the heart of meditation. Not giving up or resigning, but not coercing, not controlling, not demanding things match your will. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha taught, not holding, not clinging. This is the path of purity. Jennifer didn't let go of sleep. She let go of control. She stopped making the mind do something, then the mind returned on its own. It's the same with discomfort, worry, anger, unease. Our habit is to push it away, forget it, ignore it, fight it. The more we push, the more it sticks. Instead, pause and say softly, I see you. I'm here with you. It's like opening a window to let the breeze in rather than trying to control the air. That is non-resistant presence. Modern science is catching up with this ancient wisdom. An Oxford study confirmed that acceptance rather than struggle approaches in AC, acceptance and commitment therapy, significantly improve sleep quality and reduce anxiety after just 8 weeks. Not because participants learn to eliminate anxiety, but because they learn to stop fighting it. Sleep happiness. Peace all are like birds that come when your hand is still enough. Often the deepest lesson isn't what to do, but how to not do, not grasp, so the mind can be natural as the sky, wide as the sea. In a rare interview, a journalist asked Michael Jordan, the basketball legend behind thousands of spectacular shots, a surprising question. How do you play as if time slows down, as if you always know what's about to happen? Jordan smiled, that smile that thrilled opponents and fans, and answered slowly, I don't try to control the game. I merge with it. He said his worst games weren't when opponents were too strong, but when he tried too hard, trying to score, to be the hero, to prove he was number one, and that very trying made everything heavy. Shots went off, passes got sloppy, and the ego walked onto the court. Then there were rare magical stretches where everything aligned. He wasn't counting points, comparing wins and losses, or hearing the crowd. In that state, he wasn't Jordan. He was part of the flow, like a musician, blending into the universe's orchestra. Long threes, no-look passes. It didn't come from me, but from the absence of me. He called it egoless play. The moment I stop trying to be somebody, I'm truly myself. And that's when I become legendary, he concluded. The room fell silent. Few expected that behind the cool, unbeatable aura, Michael Jordan lived by a philosophy akin to a meditation master's. Maybe that's why he's more than an athlete. He's an icon not for what he controlled, but for how he let go of ego and let genius move through him like water through hands, like wind through a forest. A musician afraid of hitting a wrong note unconsciously tenses up. Fingers stiffen, heart races, and the music loses its naturalness. When fear and forcing drop, hands soften and sound begins to flow. That ease isn't laziness, it's mastery, where ego no longer blocks beauty. So it is with meditation. Beginners crave concentration, hoping to reach stillness and clarity. The more they crave, the more the mind scatters, because that craving is the ego's birth, a me trying to get somewhere. Only when they stop clinging to outcomes does concentration appear lightly, like a lake going calm after the wind. In modern psychology, this is called flow state, where action and actor are no longer separate. When you do something with full attention, unbroken by fear, judgment, or craving, you melt into the work. Strangely, that's when you perform best. This is very close to egoless action in Buddhism. When action isn't driven by the ego, by self-display, by win, lose, by the need for recognition, it is action in freedom. You don't need to be someone. You only need to be present for each movement. That is the spirit of Wu Wei, not acting from ego, but from awareness. A University of Chicago study confirms this. In flow dopamine, the neurotransmitter of well-being rises naturally, while self-judgment regions of the brain quiet down. The less ego, the more effective. The less you strive to become, the closer you get to the essence of the action. Now that we've taken in one thing clearly, water, though soft, passes through stone without a fight, let's move on to learning how to watch emotions like weather, not forcing them to change, but seeing them clearly, quietly. Within each of us, there is a very wide expanse of sky. But most of the time, we only see the clouds drifting in front of us, and we mistake ourselves for those clouds. Sometimes they are clouds of anger, sometimes clouds of anxiety, sometimes clouds of sadness or despair. In truth, clouds are only temporary phenomena. The sky, our vast, quiet inner nature, has always been there. The Buddha taught emotions come and go, like clouds in a windy sky. Mindful breathing is the anchor that keeps us in the present. If you pay attention, you'll see that no emotion lasts forever. Each emotion arises, remains for a time, and then dissolves. What makes them dangerous is identification. We don't just say anger is present. We say I am an angry person. From that moment, we hand our emotions the power to run our behavior. Maria lives with her 6-year-old son in a small apartment at the end of a 3rd-floor hallway. A single mother, she works 2 part-time jobs to cover expenses and handles everything at home from utilities to those nights when her son gets sick. Fridays are always special because that's when her son's father picks him up for the weekend. For the boy, it's a joy he looks forward to. For Maria, it's a rare chance to exhale, not because she dislikes being a mom, but because she needs to recharge to be a better one. That afternoon, Maria got off work early. She stopped by the market for a few things for her son, went home and prepared a small bag pajamas, a few toys, and the book he likes to read before bed. Everything was ready by 4 p.m. She told him to sit on the chair and said excitedly, "Dad will be here soon. Be good, okay?" He nodded, legs, swinging, eyes shining. Then 4:15 passed. Then 4:30. No doorbell, no call. A pang started in Maria's chest. She looked at her phone, then at the wall clock. 5:15. Not a single text. Her son looked up and asked barely above a whisper, "Mom, why isn't Dad here yet?" Maria swallowed. That simple question felt like a needle piercing an old memory. Times he'd been late, broken promises, or disappeared without a word. Wounds she'd tried to bury began to stir. She paced the room, her heart buzzing like hundreds of bees in her chest. She muttered, almost snapping, "Always the same. He can't even send a text. I'm so stupid to still trust." Feelings surged. Not just anger, but a mixed wave, angry at being disregarded, angry for her son's sake, angry at herself for hoping again. She felt like she was about to spill over like a glass filled to the brim, needing only a tip to overflow. But just as Maria dropped into a chair, a teaching she'd read somewhere flashed through her mind. Observe emotions the way someone on the sidewalk watches traffic pass by. Don't jump into the traffic. Maria paused. She placed a hand on her chest and felt her quick heartbeat. Then gently she whispered, "I am angry. Very angry. That's all." She didn't try to push the anger away, and she didn't justify it. She simply recognized it like someone standing under an awning quietly watching the rain pour down. The rain still falls, but that person doesn't get wet. Strangely, that recognition didn't make the anger vanish, but it stripped the emotion of its control. Maria's breathing began to slow. Her body loosened, no longer taut like a drawn wire, but softening like music, easing after a crescendo. 6:30. The doorbell rang. Maria stood up and opened the door. Her ex-husband was out of breath. "I'm sorry my car broke down. I couldn't call because..." Maria lifted a hand, lightly cutting him off. He waited a long time. "Next time, let us know." Her voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't weak either. It was a reminder, clear and calm. She turned to her son, knelt to retie his laces, put the bag in his hand and smiled. "Have fun, sweetie." The door closed. Back in the small apartment, Maria sat down, closed her eyes, and exhaled. Not a tired sigh, but the breath of someone who has just stepped out of a storm without being swept away. If you hold a balloon too tightly, what happens? It pops. Not because the balloon is bad or you're malicious, but because you're gripping too hard. Hold it gently, not squeezing, not letting go, and it floats freely, beautiful in the wind. Emotions are exactly like that. We're often taught to control our emotions as if they're wild animals that must be caged. But the more we clamp down and suppress, the more tension builds, until one day we explode. That's when we lash out, break down, or overreact to something tiny. Not because emotion is wrong, but because we've been squeezing too long. Buddhist teaching emphasizes a simple but profound truth. All emotions are impermanent. They come and go like clouds crossing the sky, like waves that reach the shore and dissolve. Suffering doesn't come from emotion itself, but from clinging to it, identifying it as who we are. When you're angry, you often say, "I'm an angry person." But the Buddha taught, change the mind's language. Try saying, "Anger is present." It may sound like a mere phrasing tweak, but in reality, it's a deep shift in perception. You're no longer a victim swallowed by anger. You become the one standing outside watching anger arrive, like watching a passing rain. Modern science arrives at a similar conclusion. A UCLA study found that simply labeling an emotion, accurately saying, "I feel anxious," "I feel sad," significantly reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's center for strong emotional responses. In other words, correct recognition is the first step of healing. You don't need to eradicate emotion. See it clearly, name it accurately, and it softens like clouds thinning under sunlight. With that small change from "I am anger" to "anger is present," you stop being the squeezed balloon. You become the person who holds lightly, and in that lightness, you are free. In meditation, there's a beautiful image. When you see the rain, you are not the rain. When you see anger, you are not the anger. The Buddha's teaching is very clear. Suffering doesn't arise from emotions themselves, but from identifying with them. You don't suffer because you're sad. You suffer because you believe you are the sadness. You're not the rain, but you think you are the thundercloud. That mistaken view of self is the root of suffering, not the emotion, but the misperception about who you are. Many who work in caregiving therapy or helping professions may recognize themselves in the details that follow. This is David's story, a longtime healthcare worker at a hospice center. His job is to accompany terminal patients, people with only a few weeks, even a few days left. David has a warm heart, and no one can deny his devotion. Every day he entered rooms with a gentle smile, a tray of medicine in hand, soft questions and listening eyes. He cared about everything: meals, sleep, physical pain, and the invisible fear in each patient. He was present not just with skill, but with his heart. Precisely because of that, David slowly burned out. Not from workload, but from the heaviness in his heart. When a patient died, he didn't note it as a medical process. He felt as if he had lost a family member. When relatives cried, he didn't just witness it. It cut through him like a deep wound. The emotions were no longer outside, they became him. He began to lose sleep. Long nights replayed scenes like a loop. A thin hand gone still, a final gaze wailing in the hallway. He lost his appetite. He came home without smiling at his young daughter. Sometimes he sat in his car for hours, unable to walk inside. He told no one. Deep down, he thought, I'm weak. I should carry this pain for them. If I'm not strong enough to bear it, what good am I? That thought, seemingly loving, was the invisible rope tightening around his heart, day by day, leaving no room to breathe. Until one day, after a 36-hour shift, David, half awake, stumbled across an ad for a short meditation retreat in the countryside. He didn't know why he signed up, only that he needed something, though he didn't know what. At a small meditation hall among pines on the first afternoon, he met an elderly teacher in a dark brown robe, upright without tension, eyes clear as an autumn lake. David hadn't planned to say much, but found himself blurting, "Teacher, I feel like I'm drowning. I work with the dying, and I can't hold myself together. Every time they hurt, I'm dragged down with them. The harder I try to be strong, the weaker I get." The teacher smiled very softly. "You think you're a boat," he said, "but boats tip over easily. They sink." David was startled. Then, what should I be? A lake. A lake. A lake doesn't carry anyone. It just is still reflective. When a tear falls, the lake ripples, then returns to calm. You don't need to bear others' suffering. You need to be present enough, and that stillness is the greatest gift you can offer. David was stunned, one sentence like a hammer cracking a stone within. He realized he'd drifted from his role. He was there to care, not to absorb. He was a witness, not a sponge soaking up the world's sorrow. From then on, David changed his practice. He still went to work, still held patients' hands, still sat by their beds. But he no longer told himself, "I must carry this for them." He simply reminded himself, "I am here. I am the lake." Whenever emotion rose, he placed a hand on his chest and breathed. That's it. He named it. This is sadness. This is compassion. This is fear. And he let it pass like clouds. David didn't turn cold. On the contrary, that stillness let him be fully present. He wasn't swept under. He still felt moved and fell silent at life's final moments. But he didn't strain. He didn't squeeze the balloon. And in that gentle letting go, he became himself without becoming anything else. David's story recalls a simple, deep image. A man crossing a river clutches a heavy sack of stones. Water up to his waist, the current strong and icy. Someone on shore shouts, "Drop the stones. You'll be lighter, you can cross." He looks up exhausted, but determined. "I'm afraid if I let go, I won't be a good person anymore." It sounds odd, but how many of us are carrying such sacks of stones? The feeling that we must suffer for others to prove our love. The belief that if we don't carry their pain, we are cold and uncaring. The habit of equating compassion with suffering. But Buddhism doesn't teach that. The Buddha never said that to love someone you must hurt as they do. He taught metta, loving kindness, the wish that others be happy, and karuna, compassion, the wish to help them out of suffering. Both must rest on mindfulness and wisdom, not impulsive emotion, not melting into someone else's pain. The practices of contemplating the body in the body, feelings in feelings, teach a core point. Look at your body and feelings like someone standing on the bank of a river. Know them, but don't jump in. Feel them, but don't be swept away. You may feel anger, sadness, or ache at others' pain, but you don't need to become that pain. If you're not careful, compassion turns into fusion. Your mind gets pulled into someone else's storm. You tire, grow confused, lose your bearings, and you, the one who wanted to help, become the one who needs rescue. Modern science sees this too. Researchers at UCLA and Harvard found that people with cognitive empathy, knowing others are in pain while maintaining clear boundaries, help more effectively. Those with excessive emotional empathy are more prone to burnout, depression, or freezing in emergencies. So when you're caring for others as a doctor, teacher, parent, or friend, don't forget to return to yourself. If you feel yourself getting pulled into the other person's sorrow or anger, breathe slowly. Inhale, knowing I am present. Exhale, knowing this emotion is not me. You don't need to be a fragile boat carrying all suffering. You can be a lake, quiet, clear, reflecting everything without sinking beneath any wave. And that calm, not straining, not controlling, not being swept away, is the deepest healing. It's where others can lean without pulling you down. Some emotions come from outside, like David's, yet some arise from within, from unhealed places, broken beliefs, or self-doubt. One such emotion, silent but persistent, is fear. The next story is about James, a student held back by anxiety because he believed he had to be free of it before living the life he wanted. Sometimes you don't need to wait for clear skies to step outside. You learn to live with the rain and keep walking. There are storms that don't come from outside, but rise inside you, not because someone insulted you or a major crisis hit, but simply because you're about to walk into a crowded room. Your heart pounds, your hands go cold, your mind goes blank. You just want to disappear. Many live with that feeling for years, call it social anxiety. Deeper still, it's the fear of being seen. James, a freshman, is a clear example of that seemingly invisible fear. He's bright, hardworking, and deeply inward. He loves literature and philosophy, and often writes long reflections on his blog. But there's one thing James fears most standing in front of others. Whenever a professor asked for comments, his heart raced. If someone held eye contact for more than a few seconds, he wanted to crawl into a shell. He skipped group work, declined invitations, and even considered dropping out just to avoid showing up. One day, his elderly, steady philosophy professor kept him after class. He looked at James, not judging, and asked gently, "You write very well. Why are you so quiet?" James lowered his head. "I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm scared they'll laugh or judge me. Everyone seems confident except me." The professor nodded and smiled. "Have you considered that you don't have to get rid of anxiety to learn? You can learn with anxiety." James was confused. "But if I'm still scared, how can I focus?" The teacher replied softly. "Like walking in the rain, you can shiver and still move forward. The key is, you're not the rain. You're the one walking through it." No one had taught James this: emotions aren't barriers, unless you turn them into a prison. From that day, James stopped waiting to be anxiety-free before going to class. He went with his anxiety. He stopped waiting to feel fully confident before raising his hand. He raised it even if it trembled. During his first presentation, his voice shook a little, but his eyes were steady. He didn't pretend to be fine. He breathed and told himself, "Anxiety is present, and so am I." Strangely, once he stopped running from anxiety, it lost its overwhelming grip. James learned to attend class with anxiety, like carrying a small cloud overhead while walking under a vast blue sky. A meditation teacher once told a student, "You can't carpet every road, but you can wear shoes." That simple line holds a great truth. No one can guarantee the world will always be smooth, neat, and to your liking. Sometimes the road is rocky: work stress, family loss, uninvited negative emotions. Instead of trying to perfect the world outside, the teacher reminds us, tend to the inner life first. Learn to move through the world with feet protected by mindfulness and understanding. Anxiety, fear, hurt, no one escapes them entirely. The difference between the troubled and the peaceful isn't who has more problems, but who knows how to see problems rightly. If you learn to live with emotion, to observe it, not overreact, not identify with it, then it's like a small pebble in your shoe. You know it's there. You feel it, but it doesn't stop your steps. Little by little, when you don't resist or try to rip it out at all costs, you may be surprised how light it becomes, hardly painful at all. For over 2,600 years, the Buddha has said this with great clarity. In the Anguttara Nikaya, he taught, "When eyes see forms, do not grasp. When ears hear sounds, do not cling. When the mind gives rise to a thought, know it is a thought, not the self." A brief teaching, but the root of inner freedom. When you know that emotion is not me, but only a current passing through you, won't be dragged like a leaf in a flood. You become the person standing on the bank watching the flow without being swept away. Try this. You're feeling anxious. Instead of suppressing or fleeing it, pause and say to yourself, "I am feeling anxious." Just that one sentence, no judgment, no pushing away, no clutching, is the first step of awareness. And the remarkable thing, modern science fully agrees. A notable study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders shows that when people simply name their emotions accurately, "I feel sad," rather than "I am a sad person," activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear and stress hub, significantly decreases. Meaning, with simple mindful awareness, your body can shift out of high stress. No medication, no fighting, just being present with what is. This is the spirit of feeling observed as feeling in Buddhism, clearly knowing an emotion is present, without clinging or rejecting. No need to eliminate or fix. Just see and release. A common misunderstanding is, I can only be at peace when everything is resolved and I'm no longer anxious. That's like saying, I can only walk when there are no stones on the ground. It's impossible. You don't need a perfect day to live a full life. You only need to accept that life isn't perfect, and neither must you be. All you need is to wear good shoes made of mindfulness, compassion, and understanding. When emotions come, you don't chase them away. When emotions go, you don't pine for them. You are not the anxiety, the confusion, or the fear. You are the sky. Emotions are only clouds passing by. And so James's story, once held back by anxiety, becomes a healing journey through mindfulness. We've walked through 3 lives and 3 emotions: anger, sorrow, and fear. Each person is a lesson. Each response is a reminder. You are not your emotions. You are the vast sky. Emotions are passing weather. Before we close tonight's journey, I invite you to pause to take in the full picture the Buddha's teachings have quietly painted all along. A picture not for viewing from afar, but for living in day by day, moment by moment. Now, as the final story gently comes to an end, I invite you to let go of all effort, resting in simple presence and stillness. No need to understand anything more. No need to do anything more. Just breathe and know you are here, simply resting in the peace that has always been available. You don't need to become better. You don't need to overcome anything else. You don't need another layer of philosophy. In this moment, you are already enough. Beneath layers of thinking, beneath waves of feeling, beneath the roles you carry all day long, there is always a quiet, gentle, boundless space where you are truly yourself. No judgment, no comparison, no striving to be loved. Right here in this simplicity and ease you come home. Home to yourself. Home to the mind's natural state, where peace doesn't come from achieving, but from realizing it was never lost. Thank you for walking with me tonight on a journey, not to run anywhere, but to pause, listen, and recognize you have never lacked anything needed to live fully. If these minutes brought value to your heart, please feel free to leave a comment below so I know you're here. Please like, share the video, and subscribe to Buddhism Seeds to continue traveling together, where each video opens a door to the quiet depths within you. Wishing you a truly restful sleep, a peaceful night like the open sky, where clouds drift by without leaving a trace. See you again in the gentle light of tomorrow.